Okay, Mr. Chair, we are live and recording.
Thank you, Emily. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 12th Planning Commission meeting today. My name is Todd Lehman. I will be chairing today, and I will ask Mr. Bridger to cover some procedural rules per the governor's executive order.
Sure.
John?
Thank you, Todd. Yes, in response to the governor's executive order for conducting virtual meetings, this meeting is being recorded and also streaming live on RPA's YouTube channel if you prefer to view it that way. Please see the chat box for the YouTube link for how you can access that link. As part of this executive order, any votes to start the meeting must be by roll call, and any vote thereafter on any items on the agenda must be conducted by roll call vote. So we do need to establish a roll call vote for the quorum. Whenever you're ready, Chair.
John, if you do conduct a roll call.
Okay. Todd Lehman.
Here.
Okay. Councilman Ledford.
Here.
Chris Mabey.
Here.
Okay. Weil Coker.
Here.
Dave Matthews.
Here.
Jason Farmer.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Okay. And Thomas Palmer.
Here.
And Blythe Bailey. I see he just joined us. Blythe.
Here.
Okay. And I think, as I indicated earlier, I think Mary Hyatt will be joining us in a few minutes. She's running late. So we have a quorum here.
We'll just note that for the record. And then, John, I believe you've got some public announcement regarding the transportation planning process.
Yes, just want to let everybody know that we are kicking off our 2050 regional transportation plan. And as you can see here on the screen, how you can get involved. This plan represents our community's goals and priorities for transportation investment, and also programs our federal funds for transportation projects throughout our region. If you'd like more information or to sign up for project updates, please use the link shown on the screen that you see there being shared via our Zoom chat. You can also find a congestion survey at this website to give your thoughts on congestion in the region. That'll inform our planning work as we prioritize projects for the next 30 years. A direct link to that congestion survey is also being shared via the Zoom chat link. We look forward to your participation in these planning efforts. And that's all the announcements I have, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. As a reminder, all attendees must register prior to today's meeting to speak. This information was provided to applicants and public stakeholders as part of RPA's notification procedures. It is also published on RPA's website. As a note, if you have not pre-registered, you can still email your comments on a zoning case to rezoning@chattanooga.gov, and the RPA staff will forward any email comments today to the appropriate local legislative body for their review before final action is taken. And Emily, do you have some comments relative to chat function?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So as previously mentioned, the meeting is being recorded and also streaming live on RPA's YouTube channel. Those that are attending the meeting as participants will not be allowed to chat. However, when it's time for those that have registered, whether that's the applicant or those in opposition, when it's your time to speak, I will call your name and I will unmute your microphone, and then you'll be able to speak. And then at the end of that case, your microphone will then be muted. If anybody that was trying to speak has trouble communicating with staff throughout the call, they can send technical questions to rezoning@chattanooga.gov. Similarly, if anyone listening to the call has questions or comments on the next steps, whether going to City Council or County Commission, they can email rpa@chattanooga.gov, and we'll put all of that information in the chat for people to see. And then staff will contact you after the meeting to let you know about that. And lastly, please note the Regional Planning Commission makes recommendations on zoning cases to the appropriate legislative body, which will then be held at a later date with the City Council or the Hamilton County Commission.
Thank you, Emily. Let me go through some opening remarks, and I'll probably be reading them. They're lengthy, and I apologize if I misquoted. Hopefully I will get through them. But as part of these remarks, I'll note our typical procedure for review of each case item but highlight some differences, obviously due to the virtual format. Planning commissioners have received staff reports for the cases for today's agenda and have had time to review each case information prior to the meeting. And we will use the following procedures as we go through the cases. For each case with a recommendation to approve or approve with conditions, I will ask the staff if anyone has notified staff that they would like to speak in opposition to the case or to the conditions. If there is no one, unless a PC member requests a staff presentation, we will proceed to a roll call vote. For staff recommendations to deny or for cases with registered speakers, we will start with a staff presentation. Following the staff presentation, if there are no questions from PC members, I will ask for the applicant to be recognized. A staff person will move the registered speaker into the forum with the Planning Commission, unmuting them and allowing them to speak. If for some reason your name is called and staff does not unmute you, please immediately raise your hand. Can they do that, Emily?
They can.
Okay. The applicant, in each of these cases where we have the applicant and opposition speak, the applicant will have 7 minutes to present their request. Please note that there will be a time clock displayed on the screen. It will track the remaining time. If there is opposition, you will have a total of 9 minutes. The opposition will have a total of 9 minutes. If there are multiple speakers for opposition, I may ask you to wrap up your remarks so that others may speak. The applicant will then have 2 minutes to respond. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the audience or the applicant. Once Planning Commission takes action, if you have any questions, please email rpa@rezoning@chattanooga.gov and a staff member will follow up with you in the next several days. Note that for most requests other than subdivisions, Planning Commission makes a recommendation on final action on the request is taken by the local council or commission the following month, allowing another opportunity for input. And staff will post those meeting dates of those cases. And I believe I have John, you may have something
Yeah, I just want to
talking about next month.
Yeah, there's probably good. People should stay tuned to our website for where that meeting will be. The governor's executive order expires at the end of this month for conducting virtual meetings. And so there's a good probability we'll be doing that at the courthouse. Just stay tuned. We encourage folks just watch our website. We'll try to make that announcement as soon as we find out. But we are already sort of planning for that likely to happen. So I just want to let folks know to be on the lookout for any updates as we get updates from the governor's office.
And I'm sorry, John, I was fumbling through papers. When is that? Will we know about that executive order? Is it the 28th?
Yeah, I think it's the 28th, 27th or 28th.
So it currently expires the 28th, and if it expires and it's not renewed, we will be in person next month.
That is correct.
That's
at
correct.
the county courthouse.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to clarify something too on the time clock. This is a PDF presentation today. I don't have the time clock capabilities in a PDF, so I'll keep time on my phone. I'll let everybody know.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's go ahead and start with today's agenda. We'll start off with subdivision plats and variances. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm supposed to announce the subdivision. I was waiting on you. So preliminary plats. Our first one on the agenda is SD 2021-0016. It's Baldwin Park Phase 3. Has a staff recommendation to approve.
Mr. Chairman, in a staff report, just note for the record, when the plat was submitted, we have a property owner as South Dent LLC. That should be corrected to Maverick Development Group. The engineer let us know that last week that they, I guess, have a new owner on this particular piece of property.
Well, it's got a staff recommendation to approve, and I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second. Okay, have a motion to approve. Do I need to state, Mr. Matthews, I believe, made the motion?
Correct.
Just to clarify for the record, it might be good. Yeah, thank you, sir.
And the second is?
It was Councilman Lefford.
Councilman Lefford. And John, if you would, since I'm,
I'll
you'll help me with that, and
sure.
And then Okay, have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Lehman? Actually, you don't vote. I'm sorry, Todd. Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe? Maybe?
Yes.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Yes.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. Second preliminary plat on the agenda is SD 2021-0014. It's Hamilton Park Phase 2. Has a staff recommendation to approve.
Move to approve, Chairman.
Second.
Thank you.
First by
Councilman
Councilman-
Ledford, Mr.
Second by Matthews. Yep.
Yes, sir. All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone?
Yes.
Motion passes, Chair.
Thank you. Third preliminary plat on the agenda is SD 2021-0013, Riverton Plat and Variance. Guess that's the name. Has a staff recommendation to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
First by Maybe, second by Ledford.
Yes, sir. All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone?
Yes.
Motion carries, sir.
Thank you. Now, just to check, Brian, I've got the same. So now we're going to do variances for that plat that we just approved. Is that what we're doing?
Correct. This is a road right-of-way variance for that same plat. It's to reduce the right-of-way on Road A from 50 feet to 45 feet, which is shown on the screen. And then Road B, which is basically like these are like alleys from the 50 foot to 35 foot. Staff recommends to approve both variance requests.
Okay, let me ask a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Farmer, motion.
Farmer's first. Yep.
Councilman Ledford. And let me just ask a question, since those names are the same, is there a different name for that plat that I should have used in that prior?
The name of it's just Riverton Development. They don't really have a name on the plat yet.
Fair enough. Okay. Have a motion to approve a variance from 50 feet to 45 feet. It's been recommended by staff. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. Variance SD 2021-0015. It's a variance request for minimum lot frontage located at 310 Tremont Street. Has a staff recommendation to approve. If there are any questions, or I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
And give Ledford the first. Looks like Matthews will be the second.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone? And that motion carries, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, staff
Yes, sir.
also note for the record, we did receive a letter in opposition to this variance request. They didn't want to speak today, but it was mostly related to stormwater issues and clearing of the site.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's move on to our new business. Item number 1 is a mandatory referral 2021-0049. It's located at the 110 block of West 33rd Street. It's a mandatory referral for sewer easement abandonment. Has a staff recommendation to approve.
Move to approve, Chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
Have a second.
Motion by Ledford, second by Farmer.
Okay, great. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Ledford,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Second item under new business is 2021-0051. It's located at 809 South Greenwood Avenue. It's to rezone R1 residential zone to UGC Urban General Commercial Zone. As a staff recommendation to deny UGC and approve RTZ, which is Residential Townhome Zero Lot Line Zone with conditions. I'm assuming that once you may have some questions on this from Planning Commission. I'm assuming the applicant will want to speak. Brian, if you could take us through.
Sure. This is case 2021-51. As the chairman indicated, it's a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to UGC for single family attached development, which is townhomes. It's in the Highland Park community. It's approximately 0.373 acres, proposing 6 units, and that equals a density of 16.1 dwelling units per acre. It's located at 809 South Greenwood Avenue, Highland Park. You can see just to the left, this is the Lucy Bowler site that's currently going under renovation. And then further to the left or the west is the National Cemetery. This is the view of the site looking from South Greenwood Avenue, looking towards the cemetery. This is a view of the site looking east along South Greenwood Avenue. See, it's primarily single family attached dwellings. This is a view south of the site. The site's just to the right, but you can see it's still single family detached dwellings. And this is a view west of the site on South Greenwood Avenue, looking towards Main Street. And this is a view looking north. The site's just right here where this wooded, the trees are in the little house, and the Lucy Bowler site and the National Cemetery to the north. This just to give you a general aerial view of the site. It's currently zoned R1. There's R1 to the north and east and south. To the north, there is a RTZ zone that has conditions. And then to the south is UGC. There is zoning history in this particular area. As I mentioned, to the north, you have RTZ. That was rezoned from R1 to RTZ in 2017 with 3 conditions. Shall be subdivided into no more than 3 lots, parking provided to the rear, and single family detached residence only. Then looking south where the UGC zones are, that was rezoned in 2019 from M2 and R1 to UGC, that had several conditions on the property. Basically prohibiting auto-oriented uses, warehousing and self-storage and adult-oriented establishments were prohibited. Then it got into specific parcels were subject to residential townhomes only and height restrictions. Looking at this particular site itself, it's vacant as well as a single family dwelling. To the north, south, and east is all single family detached dwellings. And of course, to the west or to the left on this screen, this is the Lucy Bowler site that's currently going under redevelopment. This property is in the historic River to Ridge Area 3 plan, which is adopted in 2020. And that plan recommends urban residential for this piece of property. Urban residential is traditional neighborhood development that includes a range of housing types, both single family and moderate scale multifamily. If you look at some of the primary uses in this place type, it includes single family detached, ADUs, and 2 to 4 units per lot, and cottage courts. The proposed attached townhomes are supported by the plan recommendations. However, the plan suggests up to 4 units per lot. The applicant's proposing 6, which is more like a mixed residential place type, and that place type designation is typically found along Bailey Avenue. It does allow secondary uses of multifamily, which is 5 to 8 units on 1 lot. Those are appropriate on type A street. This is a type B street. So that was sort of describing what the mixed residential classification would be. Staff is recommending to deny the UGC and approve RTZ with conditions. Again, the proposed townhomes are compatible with Area 3 plan if the density is limited to 4 units per lot. The UGC zone does allow non-residential uses that may cause nuisances to the adjacent residential uses, which again is primarily single-family detached. It's important to note that adjacent Lucy Bowler site was rezoned to UGC prior to the adoption of the Area 3 plan. However, the plan recommended industrial hybrid place type, which the UGC zone would be consistent with that policy. Also, staff also reported out in the staff report, staff recommended to deny a portion of the UGC zone for the townhomes on the Lucy Bowler site and recommended to approve RTZ because the plan recommended urban residential. But City Council voted to approve UGC for the entire site. The staff did recommend RTZ for those properties. The RTZ zone allows for townhomes. It is a more compatible zone to transition from the Lucy Bowler site to the single family neighborhood. There's already a precedent for RTZ zone in this block. As you may recall, last summer, we amended the RTZ zone standards and they were approved by City Council, and it can accommodate the applicant's request for RTZ and the number of units based on that proposed amendment. And so in order to provide pedestrian safety on South Greenwood Avenue, staff recommends 2 conditions for the RTZ. Parking shall be located to the side or rear of the property and limit to 1 curb cut on South Greenwood Avenue. Here's the site plan that was submitted with a request. We typically don't show the site plans. I think it's important in this case. If you look to the right, that's South Greenwood Avenue. These townhomes will not front South Greenwood Avenue. They face interior to the Lucy Bowler site. So they're not fronting the main thoroughfare, South Greenwood Avenue. They're facing Lucy Bowler. Here's some images that were supplied by the applicant of what those townhomes will look like. So we'll go through those quickly. And then the applicant, I'm sure she's on the phone today, she submitted this information for their discussion. So I'll keep this here when she comes on board. But again, staff is recommending to deny the UGC and approve RTZ for this particular piece of property with conditions.
Councilman Ledford, did you have question or comments for staff or?
Yes, thank you. I've been very involved in this case, working with Councilwoman Coonrod and also Ms. Shepherd in the engineering phase. I will have a motion to make when the time is right, but I'd like for Ms. Shepherd, if she would come and explain to the differences that in the application from its origin to its point now. And then I'll hold that if you allow me to make a motion when the time is right.
Yes, sir. Any other questions for staff? And let me only ask one thing. We got the comments from people that are actually in support of this. Are they in support of the initial submittal, the UGC? Am I reading this correctly?
Yes, Mr. Chair, they were in support of UGC and revitalization of the Lucy boiler in the area. It wasn't made clear if they were in support of the site plan or the proposal that was submitted with the rezoning request or with this revised one, but generally they're in support of the rezoning.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was reading that correctly. They were in support of the application to rezone to UGC, not necessarily just in staff recommendation, but you clarified it. So I guess,
Mr. Chairman, also, typically we don't show the site plans. They are required for zoning cases, but they're just illustrative purposes only. I thought it was important to show this because staff did discuss quite a bit what that visual look would be from South Greenwood Avenue, since these are to the interior oriented. So that's why we're showing the site plan. Also think I saw Commissioner Matthews had his hand with a question, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Matthews.
I'm sorry, that was my mistake.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Well, let's if I don't see anybody else, y'all can wave and I'll try to, if I don't see you, John or Brian or Emily, anybody just jump in. So we'll hear from the applicant.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Donna Shepherd and then Jerry Price. Donna, you should be allowed to speak, and Jerry, you should also be allowed to speak.
And I'll keep the time on my phone and I'll jump in when we're getting close. You got 7 minutes though.
Okay, 7 minutes. Ms. Shepherd or Ms. Price, whoever.
Okay, thank you. This is a continuation of the Lucy Boiler Phase 1 townhomes. If you'll look on the site plan that is shown here, the kind of purple to the left of that, that is the Phase 1. And I think the renderings that Brian showed on the plan, this is, so one of the staff comments that we received was that we wanted to address a blank wall. And so the other renderings that were shown earlier was the Phase 1. There are 10 townhome units on that project. We're proposing 6. And so this is an artist representation of what the view from South Greenwood would be for this particular Phase 2 project. There would be just one curb cut. The orientation is facing Vance Avenue, and Vance Avenue was abandoned during the Lucy Boiler project because it was too steep. It was basically a drop off. And so we worked out with CDOT and this property owner a way to do a pedestrian connection. So the first phase of the pedestrian connection, the top part, is being constructed with the Phase 1 South Greenwood townhomes, and then Lucy Boiler will continue that on. This property owner actually quit claimed his portion of the abandoned Vance Avenue so that that pedestrian connection could happen. So it just seems natural to orient the townhomes towards this pedestrian connection. And then also, it's really hard to see in the pictures from the street view, but there's an existing single family home that you can see here in purple on the right. There's 2 existing houses on this parcel. One is closer to the road, and then there's a carriage house in the rear. And these houses are currently about 5 feet apart. So the townhomes, the new townhome project will almost put, I think, 40 feet of separation. And we had talked to that adjacent property owner, and he was quite happy about us putting some space between him and his current house. We have met with the neighborhood association. We didn't have any objections. Jerry also followed up with the chairperson after our meeting. We did get several letters of support for this project. We've had a land disturbance pre-submittal with CDOT and the city and the fire marshal, and they're all okay with the orientation of these buildings. Like I said, this is a continuation of the first phase. Our initial application had 2 proposed conditions, and one was townhome use only, and then the second was the height restriction. We did add 3 additional conditions to address some concerns that might come with this project, being the parking would be on the side or the rear, and then we would limit 1 curb cut off of South Greenwood. And then we wanted to, if you'll go back to the rendering, we wanted to make sure that this did fit in with the neighborhood and that we addressed the street on South Greenwood, and you didn't see a blank wall. So architectural style will be a continuation of the Phase 1 project.
Thank you. I'm not sure what the time looks like, Brian. If
There's about 3 minutes left.
Okay, I'll speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Hi, I'm the designer, and this basically is a dual-oriented project. I don't think we were clear enough in our original submittal, so we just wanted to clarify that we definitely will not have a blank wall in South Greenwood. That unit will be redesigned to absolutely face South Greenwood and enter the entrances. Dual entrances will be from that, and then the other ones are not oriented toward the Lucy Boiler. They're oriented toward abandoned Vance, which is going to be a pedestrian walkway. I think we're going to have a bike rail on there also. So we wanted to enhance that connectivity also to the neighborhood. So we had the dual orientation. And as I said, as Donna said, we've had meetings. We've followed up with Bird and Coonrod. They're in support. I don't want to speak for Bird. He didn't have any opposition, but the neighborhood has been very receptive to this, and they're really excited about the phase one, which has already set precedent for UGC. The RTZ would be a hardship for us on this parcel because the site work required, I don't know if all you are familiar with the bluff that is here, but to only be able to put 3 units, which would fall into RTZ, would probably render this development infeasible due to the conditions on that site.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Chairman, I do.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you. Ms. Price, can you hear me? Ms. Shepherd, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Donna, the renderings that you're providing, are those, well, first of all, they're gorgeous as an art major, by the way. Absolutely stunning. Are they close to what's going to be built there?
Yes.
So, yes. Our artist renderings are a little bit flatter. We do have some elevation change from, I guess, the north to the south a little bit. And so the right-hand side is where the driveway is coming in. That is closer to grade. There will be steps on the left side going into that unit.
I am the designer, and I designed the other 10, and this is phase 2 of that. The other 10 are under construction, and 9 of the 10 are sold. And we broke ground, a month and a half ago. So this will absolutely follow that design.
Very good. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's
Correct.
Great.
Yeah, those are under construction right now.
Well, I can say, you mentioned you couldn't speak for Councilwoman Coonrod or Councilman Byrd, but I've had conversations with both numerous times, and I know they're extremely excited about what is going on at Lucy Boiler. Actually, we're all excited about what's going on. That kind of vision and investment in this part of town is not only welcome, but applauded. And Chairman, when you're ready, I know we have another rebuttal, but I'm ready to make a motion based on the information I have from the council representatives.
Sure. And I don't believe we have anybody signed up to speak in opposition. So I'll just leave the floor open for any other commissioner that may have questions for the applicant and or staff, or would want to make a motion. I will mention again, just, we're not approving the project, we're approving the zone, but obviously I think some people have made some comments. I mean, the Lucy Boiler project next door is I think had the same recommendation, but it was approved UGC. So I do understand that point, but any other questions, or if someone's willing to make a motion, I believe Mr. Ledford or Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve UGC with the following conditions that are listed on the slide I'm reviewing right now, 1 through 5. I can read them for the record if you'd like.
Yes, if you would, Councilman. I think that's appropriate.
Thank you. The condition 1 is townhome use only. Condition 2, limit height to 35 feet. Condition 3, parking shall be located on the side or rear of the property. Condition 4, limit to 1 curb cut off South Greenwood. And condition 5, for the unit fronting South Greenwood, entrances and facade to be oriented towards South Greenwood for street connectivity. That is in the form of a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Ledford, a second by Mr. Farmer. Any comments, questions on the motion? Okay, Mr. Bridger, we have a motion to approve with 5 conditions. All those in favor say, go ahead.
Okay, Ledford,
Yes.
maybe,
Aye.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Varone,
Yes.
and Hyatt.
Yes.
Motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, sir.
John, just Mr. Bridger, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, you didn't call my name, but I will.
Oh, I'm
vote
sorry,
yes.
Bailey. Sorry.
It's okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Don't leave John out.
All Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 3 under new business. It's case number 2021-0052. It's located at 6027 Ooltewah Georgetown Road in the city of Chattanooga. It's a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to C2 convenience commercial zone. The staff recommendation is to deny C2 and approve UGC. I guess I should ask it. I don't know if you want me to ask the applicant first whether they're okay with UGC. Is that appropriate, or and I'm asking, I guess, you, John, or Brian, or
Mr. Chairman, we do have opposition. I'm not sure if they've signed up to speak. Emily can answer that, but I do know we did receive the email last week in opposition.
Hey, Todd, this is John. I did talk to the applicant. I think they do. I think they still want to stick with the C2, but I'll let them confirm that. So we'll probably the staff presentation.
I don't have a note on here for anybody that anybody signed up to speak, but obviously if they're listening, they can send in information to the RPA prior to, say, a city action within the next month. But yeah, let's go ahead and go through staff presentation, Brian.
Okay, so yeah, sure. This case 2021-52 request to rezone from R1 single family to C2 general convenience commercial zone for proposed gas station. It's a little over an acre in size. It's located at 6027, 6029, and 6033 Ooltewah Georgetown Road. It's 3 separate parcels. Here's the view, and these are the 3 parcels right here. It's just on the south of the city limit line. Everything in the yellow looking color is the city limit line and the county limits. So it's these 3 parcels here. So they are inside the city of Chattanooga. This is a view of the site looking from Ooltewah Georgetown Road. This is a view west of the site. You can see the site is located here in the yellow triangle. Everything to the west is vacant property. This is a view east of the site across Ooltewah Georgetown Road, some of the warehousing that's there. This is a view south of the site looking towards Lee Highway. This is the Samaritan Center. This is a view north of the site, some of the single family dwellings. There's 2 single family dwellings just north of this site. Then you go a little bit further north beyond those 2 single family dwellings I just showed you. There is an apartment complex. And then again, another aerial view of the site. These are the 2 single family homes that sit right here just north. And then further north, you can see the apartment complex. There's a wide range of zoning designations in this area, but these 3 properties itself are zoned R1. To the north is A1, R3, O1, and C2. To the east of the site, there's C2, UGC, M2, O1, A1, and R1 with a PUD, which is Cambridge Square. And then to the south is C2, and to the west is C2 and R3. So there's a wide range of zones in this general area. There's also some history in this area. As I stated a few minutes ago, property to the north is zoned R3. That was rezoned from A1 to R3 in 2012 with 4 or 5 conditions. The property located across the street to the north of the site tried to rezone from A1 to C5 in 2019. Planning Commission and staff recommended to deny this request, and it was withdrawn at County Commission. However, later in 2019, it was effectively rezoned from A1 to O1 for office use. Further north of this site, 6113 and 6117 Ooltewah Georgetown Road. This is rezoned from A1 to C2. You can see the red arrow pointing to where that's located at. That had 5 conditions on that rezoning to C2. Then property at 6107 Ooltewah Georgetown Road, just north of this site near the apartments. That was rezoned from A1 to O1 in 2015. Then property to the south of this site was rezoned in 2013 from R1 to C2. So there's a wide range of history in this general location. This is currently a vacant piece of property. To the north are 2 single-family attached dwellings, an office, and then apartments. To the west is vacant land and commercial. To the south is commercial uses. To the east is warehousing. If you go further east, you have Cambridge Square, which is commercial, office, and single-family detached dwellings. This property is located in the White Oak Mountain Area 12 plan, which was adopted in 2019. The plan or place type designation for this property is mixed residential, which consists of a variety of housing types, including single family, detached, 2-unit, and multi-unit residential. All of these are clustered typically around a community destination, schools, town centers, villages, and other commercial centers. Some of the plan goals in the White Oak Mountain Plan was limit new commercial zoning to locations for commercial centers designated as plan, such as Crossroads, the Village Center, Suburban Commercial, Neighborhood Center, and Town Center. These 3 properties immediately abut one of those centers. Also, another plan goal was to make commercial centers more attractive and walkable with a greater variety of activities such as live, work, play, and shop. The final plan goal was to promote new commercial development that incorporates elements that make it more walkable and attractive. And this is just trying to show you a zoomed in view. It's a little hard to see, but the darker red is that town center concept, and the orange just to the north, that's the mixed residential. So again, this particular piece of property does abut a town center. Staff recommended to deny the C2 request, but approve UGC based on the following reasons. The proposal is compatible with adjacent land uses and development form, but in order to meet the plan goals I just discussed in Area 12 of mixed residential with small scale commercial, walkable commercial centers, and mixed use development, staff recommends to approve UGC. One example of what that could look like is the South Broad gas station, the Raceway. That's a UGC zone, and how you can incorporate an auto-oriented uses. Here's what that looks like. This is the Raceway on South Broad, and some of the auto-oriented conditions or requirements in the UGC zone are you must have a front and setback of 0 to 15 feet, but you can seek a deviation from the plan condition if you provide a street edge. That street edge must be a minimum of 3 feet in height and a max of 4 feet. Or it could be brick, stucco, or stone wall, could be a decorative fence, or an evergreen hedge to be maintained at a minimum height of 3 feet in maturity. That's how the Raceway was able to get a larger setback. They met one of these street edge treatments. Also, some other conditions in the UGC, a setback greater than 15 feet will require additional street yard or buffer plantings or other landscape treatments. Canopies are usually secondary in size and scope to the primary building. Sides and tops of the canopies cannot be illuminated or include additional signage. All mechanical equipment must be screened from public rights of way. And of course, garage doors and loading docks shall not front or be visible from the primary street. These are just general conditions of the UGC zone that would apply to this property. One primary pedestrian entrance from the primary street, which in this case would be Ooltewah Georgetown Road. Additional curb cuts shall not be incorporated on the major streets. Side and alleys should be used for access, but if it's impossible, CDOT may approve additional curb cuts. Dumpsters to be located at the rear of the property and placed away from residential areas and shall be screened. Then you have a certain percentage of ground floor openings and windows, which is 30%. And then no security type roll-up or metal doors. So staff felt that the UGC zone was better in compliance with the plan recommendations of the White Oak Mountain Area Plan than the C2 zone. UGC has standards that incorporates that walkable component, and therefore staff recommends to approve UGC.
Brian, questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, Emily, if you'll bring in the applicant.
Yes, I bring in Alan Jones. You should be allowed to speak.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Alan, we can hear you. You've got 7 minutes.
Great. Thank you, guys. So first of all, our request is to maintain the C2 rezoning, as we stated in the zoning application. What this zoning map you're looking at right now doesn't illustrate is we're also purchasing 40 feet of the C2 property to the rear of our site, which is already zoned C2. So really, in essence, what we're asking for is an extension of the existing zoning that we already have for the site, being the C2 use. And also, as you look at the overall context of this area, we're in the middle of this, if you look at the block between Ooltewah Georgetown Road, Relocation Way, and Lee Highway, it's essentially a C2 block. So to me, having the UGC zoning is a little bit of a spot zoning out of that little corner. And then, the other issues that we've run into looking at the UGC code for the audio-oriented use, a few of them would be the limitation of one single driveway cut that UGC requires. That's not feasible for a gas station, so we'd have to come back and get a second variance on that. And also, the UGC would require us to come back before the Planning Commission, and again in a few months, to get the auto-oriented use permitted. Really the big difference from a visual perspective from the C2 auto-oriented gas station and the UGC gas station would be the width of the landscape buffer along the main road. And we fully intend to do a nice streetscape, hedge and tree-lined edge along the sidewalk to still provide a good pedestrian connectivity along the front of our site. And also the one thing that the zoning map or the development site aerials does not show is to the rear of our property along Relocation Way, a hotel is currently being built. And there's a C2 commercial site in between our proposed site and the hotel that will eventually be developed as a C2 piece. I have discussed this project a couple times with Councilwoman Burrs, and she has no issues with the C2 zoning that we are pursuing. So I think with all those items, we would request that Planning Commission consider the C2 zone.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Questions for the applicant?
I have one, Chairman.
Councilman Ledford.
Mr. Jones, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Do you know, did Councilwoman Burrs indicate if there was any opposition from adjacent property owners for the request?
With this, as a phone call with her this morning, neither of us were aware of any opposition.
Okay. And just for the record, I too have spoken with Councilwoman Burrs on this particular case, and she has indicated that C2 would be her desire for that case as the applicant has originally requested.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions for either the applicant or staff? Or
Mr. Chair, for the applicant.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Mr. Jones, it sounded like you were acquiescing to meeting the positive requirements of UGC that Mr. Schultz laid out as part of their reasoning to suggest UGC, which is the sidewalks and the landscaping, as long as you can maintain C2 for the other reasons. Is that correct?
Yes, as long as that street enhancement, doing a nice shrub layer and the canopy trees within that 8-foot street yard. We're not able to purchase any additional property than that 40 feet of the commercial property behind us. So we would need to keep our landscape and enhancement strip to that 8-foot requirement.
Thank you.
Palmer, any other?
I have one question for so Alan, you'd be fine conditioning to a landscape buffer within an 8-foot requirement. What about limiting the use to what you've described in your application?
Limiting the use to gas station, convenience store, and car wash, I'd be fine with that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? For staff or the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I do agree that this, to me, it seems logical that this should be C2. It just fits in with the surrounding areas there on that side, especially up to the city limit line. And having said that, I would recommend approval of C2 with the limited use just stated.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Matthews, a second by Councilman Ledford to approve C2 with the condition, limiting the use condition, I believe, to a convenience store, gas station, and car wash. Is that correct, Mr. Matthews?
That's correct.
Okay, have a motion and a second, has been appropriately seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, roll call. In favor, all those in favor say aye. Mr. Bridger.
Ledford,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Verone,
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. Item number 4 under new business, 2021-0053. It's located at 4440 Bird Avenue. It's a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to RT1 residential townhouse zone as a recommendation to deny. I'm assuming, Ms. Wood, we've got the applicant on the line.
Mr. Chair, I don't see the applicant. So Diana Gallus, if you're here, please raise your virtual hand. I don't think she's on the call.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to deny.
Okay.
So second?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion
by Palmer.
by Councilman Ledford to deny, second by Mr. Palmer. And you do not see the applicant, Emily?
No, Mr. Chair, I have not seen any virtual hands raised.
Well, the
Chair,
motion,
if I could make a couple quick comments so y'all know kind of what I thought was on that, and then y'all carry through if you like with your motion. This was, I think, the issue for staff here, this one was a part of the property fronts on a major subdivision. It's all single family. There is also a part of the property that fronts on another street, which is more like a through street, collector street. I believe that's Lightfoot Mill Road. You know, looking to the future, that part that fronts Lightfoot Mill Road, I could see that potentially being appropriate for townhouses. But because it also comes across and fronts that residential subdivision, our concern was changing to RTZ for a housing type on that residential street.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, also, you may remember that we had the same property requested last year to go to R2. Staff had a recommendation to deny. Planning Commission recommended deny, but ultimately withdrawn at City Council.
well, to your point, it looks like better if they were to split that zoning. So I've got a recommendation and also a motion and a second to deny RT1 townhome zone. Any other discussion on the motion?
I have a question.
Mr. Farmer.
So if we vote to deny this here in just a second, and I imagine we probably will, can the applicant still withdraw before it goes to, I guess it's City Council in this case?
They can.
And still have all the rights to reapply for something down the road?
They can. They
Okay.
can.
And we'll there's just no telling why they didn't show up today, but will somebody reach out to them and let them know what happened?
Yes. Now, if they want to withdraw, they need to contact the city attorney's office pretty quickly. Once it gets advertised, it will have to be heard by the city council. They have to, as a body, take action to accept the withdrawal. It's my understanding.
Yeah, and Brian, to follow up on that, we have taken a withdrawal action on an item we've read at first reading.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. That I think that's important because there could be a number of reasons why they're not here. So I appreciate that comment. Motion to deny and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Mr. Bridger.
Yes. Ledford,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Farmer,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Verone,
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. Item number 5, 2021-0055. It's located at 8100 block of Hitchcock. It's a special permit for a residential planned unit development, has a staff recommendation to approve. And I believe we do have someone that has been registered to speak in opposition, I'm assuming. So if you would, Mr. Schultz, take us through this case, and then we can hear from the applicant and the opposition.
Sure. This is case 2021-0055, request for the special permit for planned unit development for single family detached and attached. The total acres of this entire site is 47.5 acres with a total of 227 dwelling units. That equals a density of 4.8 dwelling units per acre. The applicant's proposing 203 single family detached and 24 single family attached dwellings. If you see on the screen here, just to the right, this hatching, this is an existing PUD. They own the property next door and they wish to extend the PUD boundary. Because of that, that's a major change. That's why this case is back in front of you. And if you see on your agenda, case 54 is to abandon this old PUD. It's located at 8100 block of Hitchcock Road. You can see the site in the vicinity here. Jenkins Road just to your left. It circles back around, goes back around. Here's Hitchcock Road. And you can see this here where it's being cleared. That's the existing PUD that's being developed today. Everything to the west is the new PUD boundary. Here's another view of that site. This is just adjacent to Heritage Park, or excuse me, the Jack Benson Heritage Park.
Good catch, Brian.
And I had to catch myself last time. This currently is zoned R1 and R5, and it has also R1 with the special exceptions for a PUD. This general vicinity, everything is R1. To the south along East Brandon Road, you do have C2, and there is one little portion of M3 just to the south of this site. I believe that's mini warehouses. Again, this site did receive approval for a special permit for a PUD in 2015. That original PUD included 63 single-family dwellings, 20 two-family dwellings, 10 townhome lots, and 13 community lots, with 2 entrances onto Hitchcock Road. That had a density of 4.67 dwelling units per acre. It's sort of near the site, but it's actually accessed off of East Brandon Road, McNichol Lane. That was approved for special permit back in 2018 for 23 single-family lots. Again, here's the view of the site. Everything around this property to north, south, and east and west is single family detached. And you also, like I said, you have the Jack Benson Heritage Park just to the southwest. There are no steep slopes on this property. However, a floodplain and floodway does bisect this property. You can see it on the screen, the lighter blue screen color, that's the floodway, and the lighter blue is the floodway. These roads over here, that's called Lemonade Street, Honeycomb Lane. That is part of the existing PUD that's being abandoned. This is located in East Brandon Corridor Community Plan, which is adopted in 2003, which recommends low density residential, which is typically single family, with a density of between 1 to 5 dwelling units per acre. This PUD has 4.8 dwelling units per acre as a density, which is in line with the land use plan recommendation. Here's the PUD plan that was submitted with the application. You can see this road in the middle. Everything to the right was the existing PUD that's already been approved and under development today. These are the townhomes. They're to the interior of the development. On the exterior, you have all single family detached dwellings. So overall, again, you have 203 total single family detached dwellings, 24 townhomes, and that's the proposed plan. Here was the old plan, just for a portion of the site. Again, that was 93 units on 19 acres. Staff recommends to approve the new PUD. Proposal is compatible with adopted land use plan. It is compatible with adjacent land uses and development form. And of course, I spelled this wrong, usable. Proposal provides on-site usable open space that is accessible to the residents. We also want to point out too, this PUD plan also provides pedestrian connectivity to the Jack Benson Heritage Park, which is a good thing. It's what you want to see in a PUD. So it does provide that connectivity throughout this development to the park. You can see them sort of highlighted on the screen. It's very hard to see, but there are pedestrian connections provided to the park. So staff recommends to approve this recommendation for special exceptions permit for a PUD.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Mr. Farmer.
And I don't know that this really matters, but how do we approve a new PUD without abandoning the old one first?
Well, that's also the danger too. You could also deny the PUD and then
Well,
not approve.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's all going to work out. It just seems a little odd to me that we're approving one without abandoning the other one first.
Really, one of our things or goals to work on, I don't really want to call it abandon the PUD. It's more about amending the PUD, because you're basically keeping the PUD. You're just changing the PUD boundary line. I would like
I
to
guess
change
if
the
I was
terminology.
making the application, this would be a major modification instead of an abandonment.
Yes,
right.
It is, and it's weird. That's how we do these. I would like to clean that up, and that's hopefully through the zoning code assessment, we'll pick that up. That you need to tweak how you do these modifications, because it's not really an abandonment; it's a modification.
Yeah, I agree. In the future, I think it would make sense to figure out a better way than how we're doing it today. But
I agree.
I would make it. We have opposition. Sorry, I'll wait.
Yeah, that's a good point, Commissioner Farmer. I agree. We need to clean that language up somehow. Whatever you want to call it, it's not working now the way it's called.
No, thank you, Mr. Farmer. We had a discussion on Friday about how that was supposed to work. So anyway, this is what we decided to try to make it work, or at least staff. So maybe we can correct that. Any other questions or comments for staff? Okay, if you would, Ms. Wood, if you could bring on the applicant.
Rocky Chambers, you should be allowed to speak.
Bad news, Emily. You've got Chris Anderson with Green Tech Homes before Rocky.
Yeah, I'm a.
Mr. Anderson, you and Mr. Chambers, if you both want to speak, we'll have 7 minutes, and then we'll hear from opposition, and then you'll have about 2 minutes to rebuttal. So go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Councilman Ledford, for your vote of unequivocal support here at the beginning. This is phase 2 of what has thus far been our most successful project at Green Tech Homes. We've already sold over 40 of the original 93 homes that we had available in phase 1. This is merely a continuation of phase 2, which we've talked with you about in the past, or at least alluded to. We're going to a total of 227 units. That'll be 203 single family and 24 townhomes. That's an increase from that's new units, 120 new homes and 14 new townhomes. As Brian kind of mentioned, we also still have the best amenity we've ever built, which is a community trail that connects not only the Heritage Walk homes into Jack Benson Heritage Park, but also the neighboring residents across the street and down the street in Ashley Mill. You know, in every neighborhood meeting we've had, they've expressed a desire to have access through our neighborhoods, and we've made it very clear this is not just for Heritage Walk residents. This is for the community and for the city of Chattanooga. So the new trails that we put in, hopefully will get a lot of use by existing residents who already live in the area and have lived here for years. We truly want that to be a public amenity. The City Department of Public Works has been very, very helpful in facilitating us having access at the rear portion of the park. And let's see, on community meetings, we've had several. The most recent one was about 2 weeks ago. We've taken a lot of community concerns into account and have put those in the PUD plan that you see before you today. And for the more technical aspects, I'll turn it over to Rocky Chambers.
Good afternoon. This is Rocky Chambers, the engineer for this project. And I just want to echo everything that Chris just said there. We've had some great neighbors here. And we appreciate their patience, and we're glad that we're hearing all the positive response of people being able to walk through the community now on a regular basis. We are still an active construction site, and so all of the trails are not in yet. They've been cut in, but as soon as Thursday, we're continuing our permitting process to get these trails connected into the park. I am here for any technical questions, so I'll turn the time back over to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Any questions for the applicant
Chairman.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Rocky, just to reiterate from the community meeting, and I appreciate you inviting me and the community being part of that, I want to reiterate a couple of things I took away from that meeting, and that was the continued desire and even willingness for Green Tech to work with the city on the construction of roundabout at the corner of 90 degrees at Brian's all over it there. That conversation needs to be further, and I want to make sure that that stays on the forefront. And also, I took your engineering statements from the community meeting, which I would like for you to talk a little bit about, and I actually used in another case not too far away from there, of over-engineering your stormwater runoff. And I thought that was an interesting and very applaudable, if you will, effort that no one really asked you to do. You volunteered that, you mentioned that in the meeting, and I think that's extremely important in East Brainerd, considering the weather and the rain and the flooding issues that we've seen, and your desire to not pass the buck downstream. Could you talk a little bit about your theory on that?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here criticizing some of the city code, which was not my intent. I believe what you're referring to there is during the community meeting, we talked about a lot of people's concerns in nearly every development, which is what happens to stormwater, right? In order to build houses, we have to cut down some trees. In order to build roads, we have to take up some grass, and that additional impervious surface leaves the site, and we can't just let it go without retaining it. And the city has some very good city code and policies to keep us from flooding people downstream. But I don't like meeting that bare minimum. If I stand before a judge and I meet the city code, I'll be just fine, but I don't ever want to get to that level. And so most of our ponds, and certainly this is one of those communities, when I did the stormwater calculations, I took whatever that volume was and increased it by 25% to make sure that there's no question we are being a great neighbor, we're being a great partner, and we're helping downstream problems.
Rocky, also, can you touch on in the community meeting? I know I'm a little bit out of bounds here, but I think it's important. This is a big project in my district. There were some neighbors that you were working with some issues on. I believe they raised some concerns about fencing. I know that may be related to the first PUD, but has that been resolved, or the conversation still going forward on that?
I don't ever want to have a conversation with a neighbor that is resolved. In that, I don't want it to be the final conversation. We are neighbors, and we're going to be neighbors for a long time. I think we're going to have ongoing conversations and work through them together. I believe you're talking about the neighbors right next to us, and they have been great neighbors our entire time there. When we first came in, we started clearing and met with them early on. I was like, there's some trees here. I know they're on your property, but I really think they're endangering your house. So, we took down those trees. They agreed to that. And fortunately, because tornadoes would have sent them straight into the houses. So really appreciate working with them on that. We've worked with them on a few other issues lately about topsoil and roadside ditches and grasses we're planting along slopes and stuff. And we have an ongoing discussion on where the fence is going along their property line, maybe some trees and things like that. And yeah, I think we've come to a reasonable solution to some of their most recent concerns, but I do want it to be an ongoing conversation. And as recently as within an hour or so ago, we were still corresponding with them.
Okay, and last but not least, Hitchcock is widened, even though we have a utility pole that's giving us some fits, but that's moving forward relatively soon, correct?
Correct, yeah. We absolutely want to, both for our needs and the neighbors, we want to clean up that street edge. And if you can get rid of Comcast out of our city, I really appreciate that. But until that takes place, we're going to continue everything we can to improve that street edge.
Very good. Okay, Rocky, that's all the questions I have from the meeting that I attended. And Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Councilman, any other questions for the applicant? I believe we have Mr. or Miss Mayberry that would like to speak. If you can put them on, Emily?
Yes, Philip Mabry, you should be allowed to speak.
You, Mr. Mabry, you look like you're maybe still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. You're good.
Okay.
My name's Todd. You've got 9 minutes if you need it. Hopefully you were listening, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I don't need 9 minutes. Thank you. Yes, my wife and I live on the east boundary of the development. And as Rocky said, we definitely want to be good neighbors. We've been discussing what to do with the land between our property and the fence that they're planning to build. And I believe they're probably going to build the fence at the top of a slope of a drainage ditch that they put along the, just next to us. And that's fine. And we're good with that. Rocky's told us that he will probably plant some weeping love grass to kind of choke out weeds. And then that's good. And he's also said that they probably will make the maintenance of that strip of land the responsibility of the homeowners association rather than the 7 individual property owners. And that's probably our main concern, is that we don't want to be in the position of trying to require individual homeowners to maintain it, because it's right next to us. And I don't think they'll have very good access if the fence is inboard on their property, probably about an average of 12 to 15 feet, I think. So if that could be done, and the homeowners association will take care of it long term, then that's our main concern. We've also talked about an evergreen kind of buffer, and I don't know if a decision's been made. Of course, we would like that if that could be included, but that's what we've been discussing. So we're not in opposition. Those are just kind of our concerns.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mabry. Any comments or questions for Mr. Mabry? I'll only say this. I know the city has inspection and maintenance requirements for drainage structures, water quality structures that are put in. So obviously they're probably putting that on their property. So there will be some responsibility related to that. But does anybody have any other questions or comments for?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. Have a motion to approve the major modification to the existing PUD by Councilman Ledford. It's been seconded by Mr. Matthews. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Mr. Bridger.
Sure. Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone?
Yes.
Hyatt?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and Mr. Farmer may want to make this motion, or maybe not, because of the prior discussion on process. The next item on the list, since we just amended the existing PUD, or we majorly modified it, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, the next case, 2021-0054, is the prior PUD. And you're telling us that based on process, now that we have a new expanded PUD, we need to take action to abandon this?
Right. That way that old case number goes away in effect.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I got a motion by Commissioner Farmer, seconded by Councilman Ledford. All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. Next item is case number 2021-0056. It's located at 7401 Harris Haven Drive in Hamilton County. It's a special permit for short-term vacation rental. Has a staff recommendation to approve. I do not have any, I don't know if staff has received anything.
Mr. Chair, there was a written comment by Paul and Laura Newborn in opposition, but there was no one that is registered to speak.
Yes, I'm sorry, I do see that. Should have gotten it on the spreadsheet we received with comments or information from staff. There is someone that had written in to oppose.
And I just got one comment before you get to a motion, if you would.
Go ahead. I mean, I don't necessarily, unless somebody would like to see this, and maybe we should, since we have a recommend. I mean, since we're approving and we've got at least some opposition, not necessarily on the phone. But go ahead, John.
Yeah, all I would say is we just kind of put folks on notice that some of these things can grow and become something that's residential to something that's more commercial in nature. And this is a pretty big property. We just noted that we think having this one additional unit is fine, but we would have concerns if there are multiple units that kind of come online and then begin to change the character of this area. So we're just kind of putting it out there to be clear. Adding this one unit is not a problem because the access is not great to this property. We would have concerns about future requests at this location.
There's already one STVR on this property that sits right here. This will be the second one that's on the property. So as John's correct, this anymore we would have concerns.
It's on Signal Mountain, correct?
Yes, in the county near Walton.
And just obviously it'll go to County Commission for final action, and I know that's in District 2. And they are revocable, correct?
They are revocable, correct.
Through Sheriff and/or County Commission.
Correct, they are revocable.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain either. Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Yes, I would recommend approval.
Okay. Have a motion by Mr. Matthews.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Second by Mr. Maybe. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford? Okay,
Yes.
Ledford? Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer? Martin?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Barone? Barone? Okay, he's muted. Okay, Hyatt?
Yes.
Motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, John. Mandatory government mandatory referrals is next on the agenda. It's MR 2021-0050. It's located at 3420 Amnicola Highway in the city of Chattanooga. It's a mandatory referral for a lease agreement. Has a staff recommendation to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Got a motion by, did you get that,
Farmer.
John?
Yes, that's Farmer.
Farmer, a second by Councilman Ledford. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Ledford?
Yes.
Maybe?
Aye.
Coker?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Farmer?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Okay, he's muted. Okay, Hyatt?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, John. Okay, that is all of our business related to plats and rezoning. We do not have any amendments or resolutions. There is a staff report, and let me lay out sort of the way I anticipate handling this. If you remember, Mr. Fisher, the executive director for the Home Builders Association, came last month, made a request for staff to look at certain points relative to the zoning regulations in Hamilton County, subdivision regs, some other things. So he requested a review and response. And so what we're going to do, I think it'll work, and I'm sort of open to it, is Brian's got a report. I was going to allow him to basically state what the Home Builders Association had requested, give you staff recommendation that they've presented. And then what I'd like to have is some open dialogue with planning commissioners, maybe to staff based, to ask questions relative to those. We're going to put Mr. Fisher on the phone. I think this probably would be more ideal planning commission directed, but if anybody's got any questions for Doug, whether he agrees or commenting or anything like that, I'd rather that be directed from planning commissioners, but he will be on. And I believe what we plan to do is, if there's consensus, if we can tell there's consensus on the planning commission for a particular item, then I think the plan would be for staff to go back and develop that tool, develop that regulation to bring back to this planning commission. If there's some disagreement on which direction we'd like to ask staff to go, we'll probably get maybe try to clarify that with a vote. And the vote would be only to give staff direction to try to build out whatever tool we're asking. And then they'll bring back actually the resolution, or I'm sorry, the regulation changes that would be presented in more of an official form that we would take action on maybe in the next month or so, and then forward to the county commission for final action. So does anybody have any questions or concerns about that process or that plan?
I have a question, Todd. So I think I'm just going to verify what you said. So if I've read the staff report, and so for instance, there's a new zone that was talked about. So if I felt it appropriate at a time, should make a motion to approve staff coming back with a formal subdivision regulations modification, correct?
Correct. And Mr. Farmer, we may, it's sort of the, I think if the majority of the planning commission agree with the staff recommendation, we can give them that direction. I think in the case that we want to give them specific, I don't know that we need a vote on on all direction for something they're going to build out and bring back. But if there's a lot of discussion and maybe even dissent, you may feel one way about a new zone and someone else may feel a different way, then we'll move to a motion, more of a motion format. If you agree exactly with what Brian says, I think we can deliberate that and then they'll know what. So we're going to take them one by one. I think it'll work. If we don't think it's working, just tell me and we'll change it up a little bit.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
We'll give as much.
And I'm going to stop at each point just to make sure everybody's on the same page. We're on the same page of what was recommended and staff's opinion on that.
And there's 13 of them. So I think
it's going to be a little while.
So Emily, if you could get Mr. Fisher on, and like I said, at any time, if a planning commissioner has a question or wants an opinion from home builders, then please, I'll give you the floor and you can ask Doug to do that.
Mr. Fisher is allowed to talk. I'll just ask that he keeps his microphone muted until he's been asked to talk by a planning commission member.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. And I think that'll work. Brian, why don't you start? And again, the planning commission does have those recommendations results, and so by all means, now's the time to deliberate and give direction. So go ahead, Brian.
Sure. As you may remember, last month, the Home Builders Association of Chattanooga presented some requests and modifications to the subdivision regulations and the zoning regulations. And as part of that, a proposal, they were talking about reduced housing cost and promote more efficient use of land. And at that meeting in March, Planning Commission directed staff to review those proposals and provide a report back. And we've done that. So that's what we're doing to go through those. And you have the report. The report was emailed to you on Monday, I believe. So we'll go through these, but just bear with me. It's going to be a little while on the introduction here. But, you know, we staff at RPA just did not look at this on our own bubble. We looked at other departments for their guidance and assistance, such as, you know, emergency services, the highway department, building inspections department, who enforces the subdivision zoning regulations, for their input and suggestions. We also looked at reference materials such as Tennessee Code annotated. We have to follow what state law gives us the ability to do and not do. We also looked at adopted codes in the county, which such as the International Fire Code, which is the 2012 version, which is adopted in 2015. We also looked at the current zoning and current subdivision regulations. We also looked at zoning history of the past 5 years. And we also looked at our current policies, and all that was put together and discussed over several meetings last month to come up with this report we're presenting today. You know, staff does support changes to promote efficiency and housing affordability. However, we have to balance these with public safety, transparency, and be consistent with our adopted policies and codes. So when looking at these proposed modifications by the home builders, we took into consideration four questions that we ask ourselves. How will this change impact public safety? How does this change impact the overall development pattern within a zone? How does this change align with adopted policies adopted through a public planning process? And how does these changes align with other codes enforced by the county? Again, we also looked at TCA, which gives the Planning Commission and staff their authority for planning in the state of Tennessee. And those sections are on the screen here. It talks about purpose of zoning and subdivision regulations. Both basically zoning and subdivision regulations are intended to address the coordination of development with the following: make sure adequate roads and public services are provided, provide for public safety needs, and also consider the needs of existing and future residents, and regulate development intensity to minimize potential conflicts between incompatible land uses. And one thing, you know, you as a planning commission hear and recommend is land use plans or area plans. Well, how are those enforced? How do those things happen? Well, that's through zoning and subdivision regulations. Those are tools, some of the tools that are used to enforce and implement our public plan and policy goals as stated in our plans that are adopted. As stated by the home builders, and it's talking about these new rules, we need something to help affordability. We have affordability housing issues here in Chattanooga. So we want to be clear and upfront and define what affordability and efficiency mean. Affordable housing in its simplest terms is housing that a household can pay for while still having money left over for food, you know, transportation, healthcare, cars, medical bills. I also want to stress and make sure that's important to note today, while reducing lot sizes and widths may increase density in housing, it does not guarantee that new housing would be built at a price point that meets the federal definition of affordable housing. Just because you reduce all these lot standards doesn't mean the price points will provide affordable housing. We also want to acknowledge that one benefit of increasing the housing density is that it does increase the overall housing supply in the marketplace, which can have an overall effect of mitigating the annual price increases in homes as more options are available to residents to choose from. We also want to talk about efficiency. You know, increasing lot yield in development as a result of allowing for reduced road width, smaller lot sizes, and reduced setbacks is just one element of efficiency. There's other things you have to look at in terms of what the state enabling legislation adds. Additional factors such as timing of development with availability, provision of public services, protecting the urban and non-urban development, and implementing the county's regional plan. You know, staff acknowledges that zoning can impact housing supply by having overly restricted development standards, you know, such as density maximums. Large minimum lot sizes can reduce the density supply of housing. Can reduce the density of housing, leading to a reduction in housing supply. So we do acknowledge that. The home builders, when they present their proposal, if you will, was in 3 buckets. I broke them down that way as 3 buckets as infrastructure, flag lots, and zoning. Now we'll go through all these 3 buckets now. I'm gonna stop at each point and make sure we're on the same page. But the first request, this is the infrastructure requirement request. The request is to reduce the pavement width from a minimum of 26 feet to 22 feet. During our review, staff looked at this in terms of considerations for that reduction. Staff does support reduction for road widths in principle to reduce the cost. However, the adopted International Fire Code, which is adopted in 2015, and the operational nature of the county's volunteer fire response also factor into minimum road widths. For example, the International Fire Code prescribes 26 feet of pavement from curb to curb as a road profile. And then most of the fire departments in the county are volunteer. So when the emergency response, you most likely will have multiple vehicles responding to fire incidents, particularly including tanker trucks due to unreliable water pressure and fire hydrant locations in subdivisions. So when the fire response shows up to a fire, they need to have a relatively high level of reliability for adequate street clearance to accommodate multiple vehicles for 2 full-size trucks responding to a fire incident. So that's the things we looked at to come to our recommendation. So the staff recommendation on road pavement width is due to fire, International Fire Code, and operational concerns. Staff does not support reducing the pavement width from 26 feet to 22 feet, because that would conflict basically with the International Fire Code. However, staff does support any amendments that were necessary so that they would be consistent with the fire code. So we also looked at it from an operational cost perspective. We could also support reduction to help reduce construction costs. Staff could support developing an option for streets without a curb and gutter with a swale that would essentially reduce the need for concrete curb and gutter or curb inlets. For a storm sewer system, this would save cost on curb or storm drain installation. So at the end of the day, staff on the minimum road pavement width is recommending to keep it the same. Number one, due to International Fire Code requirements and the operational procedures. We do support any amendment where necessary in the subregs to make sure the street standards comply with all international fire codes that are adopted. And we do support coming back with a different street profile in terms of allowing streets to be constructed without a concrete curb and swale. So that's the first point. Is there any questions on the request, our review, and staff's recommendation?
Commissioner Martin first, and then Mr. Farmer, and I may have some comments also, but go ahead, Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, I guess my question, Brian, and thank you for the great work that you guys have done. Y'all have certainly been thorough in what I saw, and I appreciate that. But when you talk about the International Fire Code and the concerns with that, are there not communities specifically in the city of Chattanooga that don't go by the International Code and have these smaller roads? Is that happening across the country, or is this some anomaly that's being suggested?
I don't know about across the country. I do know, maybe Todd can speak better to that in terms of the fire codes. That's something we don't, as RPA, address.
Sure. Let me, and Mr. Farmer may have something along this line, but Commissioner, a good way. Let me say this. In 2015, the County Commission through the Building Inspection Department approved the International Fire Code and Appendix D. And what Appendix D does is set some road widths and connections for fire service relative to, and let me use the county as an example. We have a volunteer fire force. If we have a fire, they may come with tanker trucks. There may be multiple people responding since they're volunteers with vehicles. And so Appendix D in the International Fire Code sets some pretty good parameters for that fire response. So your question, the city of Chattanooga has adopted International Fire Code. I do not believe they've adopted Appendix D, and they have a professional fire response employees. So there's a different philosophy, and if you have a full-time professional response relative to a volunteer where you have multiple people responding. Typically, the urban centers deal with it a little differently than the suburban, rural, although we're changing. And so to your point, yes, there's a lot of places that do it a lot of different ways, but it's currently in our both in our building code for international and it's currently in our subdivision regulations. The subdivision regulations are 26 feet wide, which was the initial response and request. And I have some options. I think they've built out some potential things they can do. And so I was going to sort of add on a little bit after that. But hopefully that answers. I would assume any agency or municipality or locality that's accepted the International Fire Code 2012 and Appendix D are doing it like this. Otherwise, they would be in violation of that code. Does that help?
Thank you.
Todd, this is John. And all I would add to that is if you have streets that are shorter, like I'm sure we get to the cul-de-sac, they do allow narrow streets, but there's some design constraints in terms of how those are laid out. Like I think Brian will get this in a minute with the cul-de-sac presentation. They do allow smaller cross sections, but it has certain design limitations to get that shorter or smaller cross section.
Let me only add one thing, and maybe this will allow a little bit. The Appendix D in the Fire Code does give the jurisdictional fire marshal, fire chief a lot of responsibility, obviously, but a little bit of depending on connectivity, depending on some other things that may be proposed for a development. Currently, the subdivision reg doesn't at all. It's a 26 feet. So we may look at what I would recommend staff doing is basically making the subdivision regs reflect the fire code, and because then that may allow a little bit of deviation as long as it was approved by both the subdivision regs and the jurisdictional fire chief. But we can have that discussion. Mr. Farmer, I think you had a comment related to that.
I did, but I think I just heard. Can you repeat what you just said about directing staff to have the ability to make some modifications? Is that what I heard you say?
Well, let me say it this way. Currently, the subdivision regulations say 26 feet. And currently the International Fire Code says, and I'm being sort of, I'm generalizing, obviously. The Appendix D says a whole lot more than 26 feet. But currently you got a subdivision reg that says 26 feet and actually contradicts a little bit of the fire code in a couple of areas, more minor areas. And then you've got a fire code that says for general discussion, 26 feet. And I think what I would recommend, we've had some discussions, is let's make those consistent. And I'm not going to speak for the jurisdictional fire chief or the jurisdictional fire marshal. We've got 8 of them in the county. So I'm not going to speak at all on behalf of them. What the International Fire Code says is this is the appendix, this is the guide, and any deviation is the jurisdictional fire chief. And so my only point would be you could make those consistent. There's 2 things you can do. County Commission can vote to throw out the International Fire Code in Appendix D, or you can make the subdivision regulations consistent with that and then move through each development per development, have a thorough review through the subdivision regulations and the jurisdictional fire chief and fire marshal and have that discussion project to project. Does that sort of clarify it? My only point would be, I think if you make them consistent, you allow a little bit more discussion. Currently they both say 26 feet, period. Does that help, or does that just confuse?
It does. Where I was, and I'll call on Mr. Fisher if he wants to comment on this too, but the point that I was going to make when Brian finished this was I think with the exception of, I've got a question when it comes to the length of road in a cul-de-sac. So kind of separated from that, I think when it comes to each one of these requests that is fire code, public safety, those kind of things, I just kind of blanketly today agree with where the staff was, and I think they're right. I think down the road, and I drive a lot of subdivisions and a lot of other jurisdictions, and people do it differently. You know, they make these bump outs and narrower roads, and for fire trucks to pull in and those kind of things. But I think we ought to, down the road, maybe if we want to look at this again, have an open mind. But regarding most of the specifics of the home builder's request, I think with the exception of that cul-de-sac length road, I have a question there. At least me, one person just agrees with where the staff recommendations were.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes, Brian, I guess specifically to you, in the subdivision regs, we do have a shorter pavement width as long as you have less than 10 lots or less, which does go down to 22 feet. I believe that's right. And with a 40-foot cul-de-sac. So there seems to me like there may be one little area we could improve on that, is maybe extend that instead of 10 lots, maybe say 15.
Well, let me get to the next slide. Maybe that will answer that question.
Okay, sure.
I think it's a good question. I think you're right on. We do have, that was one of the requests of the home builders, was that short cul-de-sac. Okay. I think that's coming up soon.
Let me, because is this the first item, Brian? Do you want
It's the first item.
This? And I'm fully willing. I'll let Mr. Fisher jump in. I think unless you do, all I would recommend, and back to Mr. Farmer's point, is I would make the subdivision regs consistent with the fire code would be my request. And that what that does is that does allow the jurisdictional fire chief a little bit more. You don't have conflicting regulations if that's helpful. So, Mr. Fisher, do you want to add anything to the conversation? I think to Mr. Farmer's point, this is a much bigger conversation because it brings in commission approved international fire code. It also brings in all the jurisdictional fire chiefs. Whether we change the subdivision regs or not, it doesn't change anything related to the international fire code currently.
Well, I think, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that to start with is, I think I hear both you and Commissioner Farmer saying the same thing at the end of the day. And none of our requests, none of the proposals we have, would we ever suggest or ask the county RPA, RPC to counter anything that's contrary to federal state law. So I guess if it asked anything, it would say, is it worthy of further discussion, further studies on the road widths? I have a response to everything that Brian is going to be saying, but I'll keep it till the end and let him finish.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So I'll go through, I think what we need to do, Mr. Chairman, if you want to go through the infrastructures, because a lot of these are related to the fire code. And then at the end of that, maybe see where we are in terms of proposals for next month.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Once you go through all of these related to infrastructure, because they are basically all.
They are basic. Yeah. I'll go through those and we'll stop and come back. Of course, I think if somebody has any questions or doesn't understand,
if anybody has a question, just wave and we'll stop. Go ahead, Brian.
This is the second request. Again, this is talking about reduced pavement width. This gets to what Commissioner Matthews was going towards a minute ago. Reduced pavement width from 22 feet to 20 feet and change the definition of a short cul-de-sac from 10 lots or less to 40 foot or less. Well, staff looked at this. It's the same considerations with the fire code. And I have table D 103.4 of the fire code on the screen here. Basically, this talks about dead end streets, if you will. So what we do now in the subregs, if it's serves 10 or fewer lots, you can do a 40-foot right of way and 22 feet of pavement. That's based on the number of lots. But if you look at the fire code and that table, it's based on length and not number of lots. So the fire code says if the length of that cul-de-sac is between 0 and 150 feet, the width of the pavement can be reduced to 20 feet. Or then 150 to 500, it's 20 feet, but you have to provide some type of turnaround. Or then 501 to 750 feet is 26 feet of pavement. So at 501 feet, your pavement is a typical 26 feet of pavement. Other than anything over 750 feet in length would require some type of special approval from the fire marshal. So I think our recommendation is the same. Make the subreg amendments, follow the fire code, and not get into necessarily on lots being served with that cul-de-sac, but based on the fire code and the length. That's staff recommendation. I know Mr. Farmer probably has some questions on this. He would, whether he wants to talk about those now or move, but just wait.
I'm happy to talk about it. This is one I did want to spend a little time on if we can. So to me, we're already meeting the fire code because every one of these has to have plat approval, right? I mean, of course, we know that, and it has to be reviewed. Fire marshal signing off on the plat. So the over 750 feet special approval required. In my opinion, we're already going through that step. So, and then, and I can think of a lot of roads in our county that are more than 750 feet, with our topography and the way hills roll and those kind of things. It's a natural development style to have long roads that end in cul-de-sacs. So I would feel pretty strongly that we leave this one alone as we've been currently enforcing it in our subregs.
Okay. And I think I hear you on that. I think what we were saying that we, the staff, number one, I guess this maybe a question to Todd, does that current language of the 10 lots or less, does it conflict with the fire code? And do we even have a say-so in that based on, they're doing it based on length?
I think to Mr. Farmer's point, 2 points in the county. One, the fire marshal doesn't currently sign off on the plat, although I'm encouraging that process to now change. And I also will tell you that the fire marshal, jurisdictional fire chief, over the last 5 years is much more engaged in the process. So the point is, you're absolutely right. The fire code gives the jurisdictional fire marshal certain jurisdiction to approve. And in a lot of those cases we have, because we have cul-de-sacs much larger than 750 feet. I think to Brian's point is, based on this, you're going to see either 20 foot or 26 foot based on the fire code. And I understand the point to maybe not, my only point would be, I'd rather make them more consistent with each other. So we don't have battling regulations, because at the end of the day, it will be jurisdictional fire marshal, public safety. My only comment.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions on this?
Mr. Matthews?
Before we move on?
Doug, did you have anything to add to this? Or you want to wait till the end?
Yes, sir. I'll wait till the end.
Thank you.
We'll go on. I think the last one in terms of infrastructure is related to sidewalks. The request was reduce the minimum width of 5 feet to 4 feet for sidewalks. So staff, during their review considerations, the county is recipient of federal aid transportation funds. So therefore, Hamilton County must comply with all applicable federal and state laws related to ADA, American with Disabilities Act, for compliance in the public right of way. If you look at section 401 of the subregs, we just recently amended this, I guess, last year. Subdivision regulations requires that sidewalks be constructed in compliance with the specifications outlined in the TDOT roadway and design guidelines for standard concrete sidewalks and ADA accessibility guidelines. It's important to note the county does not require sidewalks for residential subdivisions or in a PUD. A pedestrian path is an acceptable alternative. The minimum width only applies for sidewalks constructed in the public right of way. That's important to keep that in mind. Sidewalks can also be built on one side of the street to minimize infrastructure cost. And developers may also, if they choose, provide sidewalks or paths that are less than 5 feet outside the public right of way. Staff, based on the ADA compliant and TDOT guidelines, recommends to keep the minimum 5-foot width to align with TDOT and ADA accessibility guidelines. So the request was to reduce it from 5 feet to 4 feet. Staff recommends to maintain that 5 foot based on the ADA guidelines. I believe that is all the request on the infrastructure, so we can, I guess, talk about the sidewalks and then sort of get some consensus of what we need to do.
Questions? Any questions from staff? Let me offer up some consensus, if I may. And I know there was some discussion, Mr. Matthews particularly, and we've had quite a bit of internal discussion, more related to the verge, which is the distance from the back of the curb to the edge of the sidewalk within the public right of way. We've had some discussions on that, both in this body and internally. The TDOT regulation doesn't specify that, so we've tried to allow as much flexibility as we could there. What I would recommend for staff, and we can either approve it or not approve it when they build it out, but what I'd like to see personally, and if somebody doesn't want them to touch it at all, I'd like to see maybe reflecting some language in the subdivision regs that aligns with the fire code relative to widths and requirements for that, and then gives authority to the fire chief relative to public safety, and then also refining this sidewalk section in the subdivision regs a little bit to talk more about that. I'm not going to ask staff to change anything related to the ADA, the recommendation, but maybe gives a little bit more clarity relative to some operational stuff related to who approves and verge widths and some other things like that. That be trying to better communicate that in the subdivision regs based on the practice that we're enforcing both with the fire code and internal, I think would be helpful for everybody. Staff could build that out with some modifications to the subdivision regs, and then we could deliberate it, and we could either leave everything the same or do it. But I'm looking for some consensus. I know staff is going forward.
Yeah, well, we need consensus or some type of direction from Planning Commission on these 3 infrastructure items. Again, one was reducing pavement width from 26 feet to 22 feet. And then the other one was about the short cul-de-sac, and then the sidewalks. Sounds like the direction staff was going towards was making amendments to the subregs to align with the fire code. And is that something the Planning Commission wishes for us to bring back for their review and consideration, is to amend the subregs specifically related to street standards to make them comply with fire codes?
Well,
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing is that as long as they're built in the right of way, that they have to be to that code. Is consideration been given to reduce the width of the right of way? I always thought that the 50 foot was for the purpose of having sidewalk both sides possibly, but what about if we reduce the right of way width 30, 35, 40, something to that way we can have sidewalks outside of the right of way? Is that something that could be considered?
We can look into that as a staff if that's the direction you want us to look at as part of our review.
Yeah, we've done some subdivisions with special permission for smaller widths, of course, but I think the pavement width was pretty close to the same. But that's I think we've been doing that already with special permission.
Yeah, we
in some PUDs, things like that.
Okay, that's something if you as a Planning Commission direct us to do, we can certainly take a look at that as part of our review.
I think we'll take that as direction as we go back, maybe over the next month to look at. I don't have a problem looking into that.
Okay. Do we have a consensus on the subregs in terms of the streets? I think Jason's saying no. Or hand up.
So I'm 90% there. And Todd, I carefully listened to everything you've said throughout this, and again, I agree, and frustrating that one thing says one thing and another thing says the other. My initial comments was, let's just move past the smaller road widths, leave it 26 feet because it makes sense because where the fire code is. From a practicality standpoint and the way we develop lots in this county, I think changing this 750-foot length is a slippery slope, and we're gonna raise lot prices, development costs, those kind of things, which in turn does all the things that we don't want to happen. So I strongly feel like we need to leave the 750-foot, 26-foot road number alone.
So, Mr. Farmer, your concern is this: if it's 1,000 feet, you're concerned with having to go through that whatever that special approval permit's required. You're concerned with that.
Yes,
because we're not doing it now, basically.
Specifically, that is what I am concerned with.
Okay.
Understood. Well, let me say this. I think I have no problem. Let's just stick with infrastructure recommendations from staff, and obviously a lot of our staff with the county, me included, were involved in these discussions. I at least understand the intent of the right of way. Why don't we move on, because I do believe there are other ones that may require quite a bit more from the commissioners, and if this seems to be working right now, let's move on and keep this discussion open relative to staff.
And I'm with you, Todd. I'm 100% with you with sidewalks and putting some direction behind that, because that's something that needs some clarification that has caused some difficulties.
Okay, so just to be clear for staff, the only thing possibly bringing back would be a sidewalk, clearing that up. We'll leave the street standards alone at this time until we have further discussions.
I think that's fair.
Okay,
I agree with that.
And look at the right of way. I think the right of way, as I heard.
Well, I think we'll throw that into not making any big changes but we'll continue those conversations. So
that's a good point. There's other things that we've talked about. We don't disagree. I think there's much more discussions that should take place.
And we'll continue to do that both with the Home Builders Association and this body.
Right, exactly.
So,
okay. I think staff has direction on that. So that's all of the infrastructure requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer.
Now we're talking about flag lots. The request was change the minimum lot area of a flag lot from 1 acre to a 1/4 acre lot size. That's about 10,890 square feet. Staff reviewed this and went back through the history of why do we have that 1 acre minimum lot size. It appears back in 2005, there was concerns about compatibility with adjacent lots in the same subdivision. So in 2005, it was amended to require a 1 acre lot size for flag lots. Flag lots can also be concerned with creating multiple driveways along existing county roads, particularly high volume roads, which creates a traffic hazard and a challenge with natural disaster cleanup. And we also had some experience that has shown introducing a new or reduced lot size, a new development pattern in existing residential areas can cause incompatibility issues as viewed by adjacent property owners. And just doing, for example, this is up in Walden, Laurel Springs Way. This is our existing flag lots along an existing road. There's 6 or 7 flag lots, all serving these larger lots in the back. Well, these are just some of the issues you can see with the flag lot when you have them back to back to back. I'm just trying to show an example of some of the issues that the county and we have addressed through subdivision review of what I guess the bad could look like. So staff does support a revision to the minimum lot size requirements for flag lots that clarifies that the minimum flag lot size, and this is the most important thing here, in new major subdivisions is based on the underlying zone. The flag lot, of course, does not count towards the minimum lot size. That's currently how it is now. So we're recommending to amend the lot size to make it comply with the underlying zoning as opposed to 1 acre minimum lot size. Again, this will only apply for new flags in new major subdivisions. These will be reviewed and approved by the county EMA staff representative. to make sure the lots have adequate fire access in terms of fire hydrant location and distance from the home to the curb. And this will be noted on the approved subdivision plat. Again, I want to reiterate, this would only apply to major lots. Lots inside a major subdivision. This would not apply to someone on an existing county road like you see in this picture here. These folks, if this lot here wanted to come in, not building any new roads, not building any new utilities, they would be subject to the 1 acre minimum lot size. However, if they come in and build roads, build sewers and water lines, that's a new subdivision, major subdivision, and would be eligible for the lot size reduction. So that is staff's recommendation on the minimum flag lot area. If this is something the Planning Commission would like to see us bring forward as some type of amendment to the lot size for flag lots and new major subdivisions, we entertain a discussion.
Mr. Chairman, if you are looking for some feedback, I'd be happy to speak to it.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just say I think the staff has put together good good rationale here, and I think it could be a benefit to us. I'd like to see them move forward with that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got the thumbs up from Jason. We made him happy. That's all. That's all that matters.
No, this makes sense on new developments that have certain issues or certain things to be able to allow that. So thank you.
We did, and I say staff did discuss this back and forth about being fair and consistent for all the residents of Hamilton County. Should this apply to existing lots that are not major subdivisions? We did have concerns with that, and maybe that's some other discussion in the future. But right now, staff does agree that we can amend the current lot size. So we'll bring something forward on that.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
Next, all these are dealing with flag lots, by the way. The next request is to reduce the minimum flag lot frontage or width from 25 feet to 15 feet. It's currently required that you have to have 25 feet of minimum lot frontage. EMS has noted during their review, often they have difficulty in getting a truck to turn into these very narrow flag posts. It can be a problem. And often the county highway department is called out to try to get the emergency equipment turned around or unstuck. So that is concerned about these existing lots. However, staff does support a reduction of minimum flag lot width for proposed flag lots in new major subdivisions, because these are part of an overall plan development that will be reviewed, including the county EMA during their review. So staff supports a reduction from 25 feet to 15 feet as part of new major subdivisions. And it's just something PC would like to bring forward.
And I only add, as approved by county, it's not, and just to reiterate some of staff, it is important when you have flag lots where the fire hydrants are, how you access. And so in a major planned subdivision, a lot of those discussions can have on the front end, and that would allow some of these reductions. I just wanted to sort of make that point relative to it is still reviewable, but it will allow some of those reductions to take place.
So we have consensus on moving forward with this proposal. I think I saw a thumb up from Chris and David. Okay. We'll bring something forward on that.
Consensus. Thank you.
Next is dealing with setbacks on flag lots. The request is make the flag lot setbacks the same as the underlying zoning. Section 402.11 of the subregs state that the side and rear setbacks shall be the same as the front setback as specified in the zoning regulations, which is typically 25 foot. And I think that was done as an easy way to show, because these flag lots are irregular in shape, so it's easier to apply a set standard to that what that setback would be. So staff does support changing the setbacks for lots in new major subdivisions, because again, this is part of overall plan development that will be reviewed through EMA and building inspections. So we can support changing the setbacks to match the underlying zoning. However, we'd also like to note, because these do sometimes have irregular shape, that on these flag lots, that it be indicated on the plat what the front, side, and rear is on these lots to help building inspections during their review. So any questions on setbacks? If not, it sounds like we have a consensus to move this forward next month as well, or we'll bring something back fairly soon.
You're gonna bring language back that we can discuss next time.
Right, to actually how that will actually be worded. These are just the specifics right now, or generalities. Now, this is the last one, I think, on flag lots. The request was to remove the variance requirement for more than 2 flag lots in a major subdivision. Right now, Section 402 of the Hamilton County Subregs provides criteria for platting 3 or more flag lots on a single tract of land. So basically, you can only do 2 flag lots on a tract of land. You can seek a variance with these 5 things in mind: irregular land configurations, limited public road frontage, excessively deep lots, existing land use, and topo considerations such as steep slopes, steep terrain, sinkholes, drainage ravines, water courses, etc. So I went back past 10 years to see how many variances have been requested for major subdivisions and for more than 3 flag lots. I only found 1, and that was 7 Lakes Planned Unit Development. And that was a variance for 3 flag lots, and that was approved by Planning Commission. So it's very rare that we've seen variances for this section. So the staff is not recommending to change this standard at this time, keep the variance process in place. But we did discuss this about maybe having future dialogue between the home builders and us, and to see, just monitor this over the next couple months, next year, and see how this is playing out. And then at that time, maybe get back together with Planning Commission and home builders to see if we maybe need to tweak the language, maybe come up with something like no more than 3 contiguous flag lots in any tract of land, or some other language. But we felt now it's not the appropriate time to change this, but have future dialogues on this in the future. Any questions on that?
I have some comments on that. Joe, I hear you, right? But also, I was a little surprised to hear that there was only 1 variance request, but I think too, and John and I were chatting about this a little bit, is, you know, I think the practice is a lot of people see what these subregs are, and then they just don't do it. You know, they don't design that this variance is here.
Right.
And I'm guilty of that as well too. So, you know, I really think that if we're trying to do what we set out here, and be more flexible and have more workforce style housing and have more tools to be able to do more things in these neighborhoods, I think it makes sense to entertain this request and remove that variance.
Okay. I'll tell you one thing we had talked about during the review. I thought this will happen. I'm just thinking worst case scenario or devil's advocate. I think it's going to be too costly to do this, but without some type of limit, I could see someone potentially coming in and having a street just full of cul-de-sacs like we saw earlier. I don't think that will happen. And I think that's what we were trying to look at too, is put some type of limit on it initially and let the variance process work that out.
Brian, I know you well enough to know, and the rest of the staff, that you're going to come back with something that, you know, would limit those types.
Probably. Yeah, you're right.
So I think there's some middle ground here, and whether we vote to approve it or not, unless anybody else objects, I think it makes sense to look at what this looks like next month.
What we can do, if that's the consensus, we can work up some type of language, maybe not necessarily in final draft form, but some type of what that could look like, and that you guys look at that before you potentially make a decision.
I guess I'm more of kind of the final draft guy, you know, that hopefully we could move all of this on at once.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, I guess the only thing, and it may be more like the infrastructure we talked about, sort of some open dialogue, which I think is what Brian, rules and regulations aren't necessarily there for people that do everything right. They're there for people that want to do everything wrong. And to Brian's point, if we've got no limit, then you get an expectation that you can just do it whenever you want to. And so I think what you said, Mr. Farmer, and I agree with I don't think saying you can do it whenever you want to. I don't think really good developers would do it, because I don't think you market those lots like you would a traditional, but we need some type of what's appropriate, what's an appropriate number or an appropriate hardship, or what does that look like? And then write some language in there just so we don't open it completely up. This was one that I was afraid, and I think Brian would agree, that if you say there's no limit, you get somebody that's got, again, so
I agree.
We'll work up. I think what we can do as staff is think about it a little bit more and see where some type of middle ground is potentially. And then come back with something, and either they write something up that we're ready to deliberate and vote on, or we don't, and we keep it an ongoing conversation.
Mr. Farmer, were you thinking about this just only applying like we've done in the previous ones in major subdivisions? This will not be open to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
All of the flag lot stuff is just going to be going forward, because I'm not sure how that one on Signal Mountain ended up, but I'm not even sure that one.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to do it just for all the lots along a major thoroughfare
that one on Signal Mountain, and I'll tell you, I have an interest in that. So, but it wasn't. They weren't going in and building road infrastructure, but they were putting in water lines and fire hydrants and those kind of things. So, in my mind, that would be a major subdivision. But yeah, I think we can talk about this. I think this deserves being able to talk about some more at our next step.
Okay. Just to clarify, that one variance, that was for major subdivisions. You're right. There have been more, but those have been along existing roads or private easements. But I just strictly looked at major subdivisions where they're building new roads.
Well, and the hardship stays there for existing, correct, Brian?
Yeah, right. I think
we wouldn't change anything existing. Okay.
No, I think Mr. Farmer's saying this will be just like the other request. It'd be for major subdivisions or new major subdivisions.
Okay. Can we leave this one that the direction is to maybe consider what that may look like, but maybe not have something definitive, maybe talk about? That's sort of my direction. That makes sense?
I agree.
Okay. So we'll work on something on this.
Thank you.
Okay, if not, we'll move on to the last. This last amendment. This was not from the home builders. This came about as part of our staff review. Of this request. The Hamilton County zoning regulations permit 2 residential structures per lot if the lot is able to comply with the zoning district regulations and the subregs, as if the property was being subdivided. So staff would like to recommend in these new major subdivisions where you're putting in these flag lots, that flag lot is only limited to 1 residential structure per lot or dwelling per lot.
You're talking about in the new major subdivision.
Correct.
So if I wanted to have a house and a garage with an apartment over it, a detached garage with an apartment over it, this would now restrict that?
Well, I don't know if you go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I just
well, the lot would have to be
go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say the lot, and in order to have 2 structures on it, 2 dwellings, that lot, if we change this stuff, would have to be big enough to meet the minimum lot size and have to have 30 foot of frontage, as if it was being subdivided. So in theory,
you have to meet all the setbacks between the 2
Correct.
structures.
Yeah.
So it would be a new development. Well, it would be probably an acre plus lot. I think is the point. But I understand the question, Mr. Farmer, and we can think about that. I did exactly the same thing at my house. If I was in the county, I would have had to been 30 feet away. I was in the city, so I had to actually connect it all to my existing through a breezeway. So I think that point's well taken.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. I think that's all on the flight. Somebody else have a question?
Let me ask the question, Jason. So can you see that happening? I guess you could see that happening in a brand new major development where you're trying to get as much density as you can. I mean, we wouldn't change anything for an existing residential that wanted to do that in the county, I think. Correct, Brian?
No, I know. And I think maybe we could word this somehow, wordsmith it like no more than one primary residential dwelling where what Mr. Farmer was talking about would be like a ADU or something like that.
That's fair. We'll
take a look at that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You guys don't have to recommend approval if that language doesn't make sense. I think that's all the flag lot. I think we've got direction on the flag lots. We'll move into the final bucket, the third one, and that's on zoning. Again, just a reminder what zoning does and does not do. Zoning is important for the implementation tool of our land use plans, which have been adopted through a public planning process, like the comp plan and many of our area plans, which was recently adopted, the Area 12 plan. And each zoning district itself represents a distinct grouping of uses, lot area regulations, and setbacks that promote a particular type of development. And also historically over the years, when a new development form or pattern is desired and a plan or policy supports that, we have created new zoning tools like the RTZ and RT1, which is new zoning tools that were created. So we'll start talking about some of the bullets or the requests for zoning. The request was to modify the existing R1 zone or R1 district, to reduce the minimum lot frontage on sewer and septic from 60 to 45 feet and the minimum lot area on sewer and septic from 7,500 square foot to 5,000 square feet. Staff did look at this and took this review into consideration. Staff agrees the current R1 zone does not provide enough flexibility to accommodate a smaller lot, detached single-family development concept. However, the proposed modifications for the existing R1 represents a substantial increase in density and change in development pattern that's most likely or better addressed through a no zoning tool, as opposed to just modifying the existing R1 zone. Reducing the existing R1 minimum lot size is almost like a 33% change in density from what the R1 zone currently allows. A 5,000 square foot lot is not common in unincorporated Hamilton County and represents a shift to more urban development pattern. What you typically see, like we saw today, that was found in the River to Ridge area of the city of Chattanooga. Currently, there's not even an option for small lot, single family detached residential zones by right at this point in the city of Chattanooga. We're working on some new urban zones, but you don't have this option in the city of Chattanooga. Again, changing the existing R1 district to allow reduced lot sizes could have several potential problems. Number one is lack of transparency with the public and property owners as to what type of development is expected within the R1 district. Historically, the R1 residential district has created a subdivision model that has a lot size and development pattern that is a traditional suburban model for the past 50 plus years of zoning in Hamilton County. Generally, the public has an expectation of what development under R1 zoning looks like, and the existing R1 district still provides a desired development option for residents and developers in Hamilton County. Changing the lot size in the R1 would reflect a major policy change countywide without a public planning effort to educate the public on the impacts of the proposed change. And this could also cause a growing resistance to the R1 residential districts as residents begin to understand that the zoning could mean more dense residential development where previously only one R1 rezoning request was denied in the past 5 years. So we also, as I stated earlier, looked at parcel sizes, and I made a comment that 5,000 square foot lots is not common in unincorporated Hamilton County. Using GIS, we analyzed the existing parcel size. There's approximately just a little less than 52,000 parcels in the county. As you may expect, 10,000 square feet and above accounts for the majority of the parcel sizes in the county, actually 93%. If you look on the screen, 42% of that was parcel size of between 10,000 to 25,000 square feet. But the largest lot sizes are 10,000 square feet and above. Again, that counts for 93%. Those that are 7,500 square feet or less account for 2.8% of the total parcels in Hamilton County, or 1,400 parcels. You see, it's very small. Also important to note that these parcels include community lots, townhomes. So the number of actually small lots devoted to single-family dwellings or parcels is probably actually less than these numbers shown, because this incorporates all parcels, which incorporates, again, community lots, townhomes. So that number for single family is actually probably a little less. I know this map's hard to see, but I guess that's sort of the point of the map. On this map, we're showing parcels that are 7,500 square feet or less. They're scattered sort of throughout the whole county, but for the most part, they're located in the eastern part of the county along in Udawal. I sort of highlighted in the red because I know it's so hard to see, but they're generally clustered in these little red dots. That's where the smaller lots are. Just because if I was you, I'd want to know, where are these small lots? Well, you can sort of see they're out in Udawal. And it's important to note that most of these are in the Udawal area, which is in the Wolf Deaver Creek area plan, and the White Oak area Mountain 12, area 12 plan. But they are scattered throughout. They're just hard to see. For the most part, they're concentrated in Udawal. Typically in metropolitan areas, you do have wide-ranging zoning options for single-family dwellings. We don't have that in our zoning codes. The current tools we have for small lot developments in Hamilton County zoning regulations are three, basically. You have the RT1 zone, RTZ, and the PUD. So the most common request for small lot development over the past 5 years has been the rezone to R1 with a PUD. You can see the past 5 years, we've had 38 requests to rezone to R1, and then 37 requests for a PUD. During that same 5-year time period, we had 4 requests for RTZ and 1 request for RT1. This RT1 and RTZ do allow smaller lots, but for some reason have not been utilized. Now, this is just showing you examples of what we currently have on the ground. The pictures on the left is the Meadow Stream subdivision. This is the R1 zone or R1 district. These lots are 7,500 square feet or larger. And you can see this on top is basically an aerial view, or sorry, a base map from GIS just showing you how large those lots are. They are on sewers. And then below is an aerial map of that. To the right is Hampton Meadows Creekside. This was developed using the R1 tool with a PUD, smaller lots. You can see how the more smaller lot pattern that you see on the right-hand side here and what that looks like on the bottom, just to show you what that would look like between 7,500 square foot on the left and 5,000 square feet or less on the right. So staff agrees we need more flexibility in our lot sizes for a typical single-family development, but we are recommending creating a new zone, a new tool that allows 5,000 square foot lots by right. This will provide the opportunity for 2 different single-family development options. You have your traditional R1, and then this new R1 zone, which will be a smaller lot pattern, which this again is common practice in larger metropolitan areas. This new R1 zone option would feature smaller minimum lot sizes with reduced setbacks, reduced lot frontages, and lot coverages. Also want to point out to make it clear that as with any request to change the zoning of a tract of land, RPA will review the adopted land use and area plans for guidance on requests for a change of zoning. It's also, again, just putting everybody on notice that, as with any zoning classification, new zones or tools that are created may not be appropriate or may not be recommended by RPA staff for approval for each request. For example, as we mentioned, we talk about the area plans. White Oak Mountain Area 12 plan does provide a density of residential place types from low density, which is countryside residential, which is 2 dwelling units per acre, up to mixed residential, which is 7 dwelling units per acre. There's also some areas of the county, this zone would not be appropriate because of lack of public sewer, larger lot sizes are prevalent, and there's no supported land use policy recommendation for small lots. These areas are really the northwest part of the county around Jones Gap, Hot Water Road, Mulberry Mountain, Northeast County around Birchwood, Gamble, and Grasshopper roads. So basically on the recommendation to reduce the lot sizes, staff has recommended to not amend the existing R1, but we agree more flexibility needs to be provided for lot sizes, for smaller lots, for single family detached dwellings. And so we're recommending to create possibly, we're looking at 2 new zones for small lot, single family detached dwellings. So with that, I'll stop and see if anybody has any questions, how we got to where our recommendation and what the request was, and sort of see what the consensus is from Planning Commission.
Comments?
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see their wording on your 2 new zones.
2 new zones instead of amending the R1.
Yes, yes.
Is that everybody's feelings or thoughts? I think Jason's, Mr. Farmer.
So strictly for the purpose of the conversation of directing staff to provide new zones, I'm in 100% agreement. And thank you. I think it's forward looking and you guys are right on. I do have something further on this when the time comes, but as far as the new zones, I agree 100%.
Okay, so it sounds like we got direction from Planning Commission is to move forward with new zones that are smaller lot. It also applies, I'll move quickly now if you want me to, is to the next 2. All these rely on this new zones. The next request was to increase the maximum lot occupancy from 35% to 55%. Staff feels that if you create this new zone, smaller lot, there's no need to have that maximum lot occupancy. So this new zone would not include that, if that's the direction Planning Commission would like us to look at.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. And the next one is reduced setbacks. These setbacks are talking about changing the existing R1, the front setback from 25 feet to 15 foot. The side is currently 5. There's no change on that, and change the rear setback from 25 feet to 15 foot. Staff agrees, and these new zoning tools that are created, they would include reduced setbacks. So I think it sounds like everybody's in agreement with this type of proposed amendment in the new tool.
Yeah.
If not, I'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, if I may interrupt here for a second.
Yes, sir.
Just one quick question, Brian. You've noted on a couple of these where it says that these changes represent substantial increase in density, but none of these, if I'm understanding correctly, there is an overall density cap in R1. Is that correct?
There is.
So per acre, and that is not being changed?
No, we're not changing anything in existing R1.
Well, I guess
we need to be clear about.
If these changes were made in R1, that would not change the fact that there's still a density cap in R1. Is that
would
change? Just not. If I could answer that one, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think what you're thinking about, Chris, is like there's a 5 units per or 2 unit per acre cap in A1. There's not a density cap in R1. It's limited by the lot size.
Yes.
Which is 7,500 square feet. So there's not a units per acre cap currently in R1.
So if you change to 5,000, that would change, in essence, change that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so reduced setbacks, I think Planning Commission's okay with creating that reduced setbacks in this new zoning tools that are being created for the R1 single family detached zone.
Brian, quick question.
Yes.
In the reduced setbacks, do you anticipate less trips to Boza?
Yes, I would suspect that would be the case.
All right.
I'm not sure how many go now, but most of them probably are on the front setback, I would suspect. We can find out though.
Thank you.
This next one, this is in the existing RT1 residential townhouse district. There's a section in the zoning that says any townhome development of more than 8 units must be located within 500 feet of a major arterial or collector street or highway. The request was to remove that. Staff agrees and staff supports the removal of that townhome location requirements. So I think everybody's probably in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we only got 2 more. This is in the A1 zone. This is increased A1 density cap from 2 units per acre to 4 units per acre. Staff reviewed consideration. The A1 district, the density is currently capped again at 2 dwelling units per acre. The A1 district typically has larger tracts of land, estate lots with agriculture or farming uses, or more than 1 acre in size. Some of the uses in the A1 zone can generate impacts that are incompatible with more smaller lot residential developments. And over the past 15 years, there was only 1 R1 rezoning request that had been denied in the county. So during our review, staff recommends to keep the current density at 2 units per acre and to continue using the R1 rezoning process for a shift to a greater density. This also provides a clear distinction between the A1 and the R1 district to make sure there's a clear distinction between those 2 uses. Requiring the rezoning to R1 district or these new zoning tools also provides a public hearing process to put the public on notice that their area is transitioning from larger estate type agricultural lots to small scale residential development forms. So on the A1 density, staff is recommending to keep that current density at 2 and not increase that to 4. Any questions?
I really see no problem with that. I don't think I've ever seen a rezone from A1 to R1 being denied. I think that should remain as is.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or concerns or wish to keep it the same?
Anybody else?
I think Jason just gave a thumbs up. I think so it sounds like we're good not to bring anything back on this amendment, but keep it the same.
Leaving that one alone.
Okay. I think this is the last one. This is related to septic tanks. This is a request to revise the septic tank minimum lot size in the R1 zone to allow septic systems to be solely dictated by the groundwater authority of the county and state government. Currently, the language in the A1 says the only minimum lot area requirement is 25,000 square feet for single family lots on, this is a 2-part test, on individual wells and septic tanks, and 7,500 square feet for single family lots on sanitary sewers. In practice, most lots on septic tanks are approved with lots that exceed 25,000 square feet. However, there have been some that are approved that are less than 25,000 square feet, but this is really not common. There have been some, but not common. Retaining the existing language maintains the expectation that most lots served by septic systems will be over 25,000 square feet, with a few exceptions approved by the groundwater protection staff on a case-by-case basis. So staff is recommended to maintain the existing language in the R1 zone. Basically, this applies to all the zones, but keep that language as is. Removing the 25,000 square foot threshold in the code will increase the number of subdivision plat revisions during the review process due to a large number of corrections from preliminary plat lots submitted that are under 25,000 square feet. So again, staff recommends to maintain the existing language at this time. Any questions, concerns, or?
Well, I have one. I would like to see that reduced. Now, go back to the other slide. The 25,000 is, I think, like I said, it's 2 parts. It's if you have a well and a septic system.
Right.
So it seems to me like if you're only doing the septic system and you have public water, then you could reduce that to some degree to whatever level the soil will allow.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Because the way it says, the 25,000 square feet only applies on individual wells and septic tanks. We tried to clarify this last year to clean that up. It was adopted, then it was removed. That has different opinions of what that means, the and. So we as a staff reviewed it. We felt the current process is working fine. There's no need to change it.
It still seems a little unclear, but that's just my opinion.
So our recommendation is maintain the existing language. Any thoughts from anybody else? So it sounds like nothing on that. Keep that the same. So I think we as staff have got our marching orders for next month. Or we're looking at April, May. Probably. I see Jason got his hand up.
Jason.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm wondering if maybe this should not be in the form of a motion. I've got an addition to this that is different than the staff recommendation, and that it's a change to R1. I'm wondering if I shouldn't make that in the form of a motion.
Let me ask the question this way, because I think there's maybe one way to do it that we may not need a motion. Is your motion going to be to develop language that would allow some of these things by right in an R1?
Yeah, it would be specifically making some changes to R1 that would allow for more flexibility in lot sizes and more economic development. And I do kind of want to be specific in what I'm and at least what I'm asking for. You're muted, Tom.
I would may I say this, that to let him submit that to you, and you can go ahead and discuss that and then bring that back along with your other recommendation.
Let me ask John, because here's I don't disagree. Let me tell you sort of where we figured I figured this discussion may go. Obviously, there's a clear discussion that needs to be had relative to changing a zone by right and creating new zones, and the thought of transparency and making sure you have multiple zones, and you do have to go through a rezoning to get more density to say an R1 added. And I believe that's where planning commission staff to have, so when they go do community meetings and they talk about R1, there's a specific R1 and then additional things. I guess if you want to make the comment, Mr. Farmer, I'm going to allow John to jump in. I could see to Mr. Matthews' point, you could, whatever you want to state, they could look at language in an R1, not necessarily, not that they would recommend that to Planning Commission, and we can maybe make note of that next week or next month.
I think Mr. Farmer's talking relates to specifically the septic language. I'm not sure if he's talking about other changes.
It's not. My intent is and when I made my comments earlier related to the new zone, I said I totally support the new zone, but where I'm headed is changes to R1. And I tell you what, maybe just let me say what they are, and we can talk about them. And then maybe it'll be appropriate to have a motion, but the assessor's office just came out and said, expect 30% price increases and those kind of things. And I got a little house that I've built probably 25 times. That house is almost $40,000 more to build now than it was 12 months ago. And it's just, when I drive around, if you want to see what the future looks like, drive to Nashville and you'll see lots getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I heard what Brian said, and I agree with a lot of what Brian said, but a lot of that is history as well. We're looking at history, and, I don't want jobs in Hamilton County to go sleep in Ray County and Catoosa County and those kind of things. So I think we need to make some of these adjustments. So hopefully we can make it into a motion at some point, but what I'd like to talk about is to direct staff to make changes to the existing R1 for only lots that are on sanitary sewer to be, for the frontage to be 50 feet. Lot sizes on sewer to be 6,000 square feet, dwelling size limits to 45% of the building size and limit to 55% of the lot area, and building setbacks to be 20 feet in the front and 20 feet in the rear is my proposal that we give staff direction to.
And that's in addition to the other new zones.
That's correct.
Right, right.
We would have this adjusted R1 tool, and then we would have these new zones that you're bringing.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I did see where Doug Fisher, I think, is raising his hand as well.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me ask John. Let me ask this question: is it appropriate to agree with the majority or with a lot of Plan Commission to go ahead and build out some other options, but then also based on Mr. Farmer's request?
You can certainly add it to additional assignment for us to do. All I would suggest is make sure we, I guess, have the commission deliberate on that thought from Mr. Farmer. Make sure as long as there's a consensus, a strong consensus to do that, we'd be happy to.
Well, my only thought on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll allow anybody else to jump in. My only thought on this would be that to see the language, to see the other options, and then deliberate it and make a motion to pass one or the other or both after a public deliberation once it's placed on an agenda. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Whatever you do, this would not be, you would not be taking formal action to adopt anything until next month.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Maybe Mr. Farmer can clean it. What are you, I guess, these new zones are created. Are you thinking those would not do what the R1 zone does now? Or what you're proposing, I guess I should say.
I think the proposal is to change the R1.
It's a both and. Yep.
Correct.
And so my only thought, and I don't mind asking for a motion, but I think we can do both. I think y'all can write your recommendation based on a two new zones based on the proposal you just did, and then also take Mr. Farmer's comments, rewrite an R1, and then we can openly deliberate those. And I mean, the only thing I would say that, and I'll reiterate staff's point is that when we changed R1 by right side yard setbacks with no problem from 10 to 5, which I think hopefully helped I think when you do a wholesale change, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that it may have other implications when you do it, when you change it by right. And I think that's the staff.
Right. And staff did not bring this up today, but it is in the report about the existing R1 zone properties we have. As I mentioned earlier, there's a little less than 52,000 parcels in the county.
Well, let me ask you a question, John. Do you need a motion from us to write up language based on Mr. Farmer's comments?
As long as there's a general consensus, I guess it'd be interesting to hear other planning commissioners weigh in on that thought. If there's a general consensus, we don't need it.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to see the comparison. We haven't seen the two new zones, and so I think we should add Mr. Farmer's request.
It may be that our request answers Mr. Farmer's questions. I don't.
I think the only thing
I don't have questions about. I applaud the new zones.
Right.
I think that they're a fantastic tool. I feel very strongly that we need to do both. We need the current new zones, and we need to adjust R1.
Okay.
Well, let me only say that whatever is presented doesn't have to be immediately voted on after deliberation. So I would agree. Let's write up, unless y'all need a motion, let's write up basically what an R1 revision may look like based on Mr. Farmer's comment, also on the staff recommendation for two new zones. And then we'll have those to review collectively, and then we can deliberate them on their merits.
Right. That's fine. Yeah. On this slide here, this is just some of our initial action steps. Today you're presenting to you our response. April, May, working with other departments to draft these new tools. We wasn't sure how many tools or what amendments PC would be directing us to do. So the timing may be a little off. We're thinking May, June, maybe closer to June before we bring these tools back to you for review. And then June, July, these will be in front of the county commission, depending on the timing. That's sort of our action steps. And I think that's where we are on that. I think we as staff have the direction we need from Planning Commission.
Joe, what you're saying, Brian, is we should not expect this back next month?
Sub-reg stuff fairly quickly. I'm not sure because we're doing, actually, got a lot of zoning cases to review. It's just a matter of timing. I didn't want boxes in to say this will be in front of you in May and then not make it in May. That's why I put in May, June. We're certainly going to try our best to get it back to you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I agree we should look at all options here because I think we're doing some things that'll strengthen what's happening here. I just wanted a point of clarification between this conversation and the study that's being done on zoning tools, and what the difference between this conversation and that conversation is, just for everybody's clarity, because I think it needs to be said.
The zoning tool, go ahead, John. I was going to say, well, zoning tool assessment that we're going through now, which we'll talk about as part of our staff updates in a few minutes, that's only for zoning in the city. We're not undertaking that in the county. But part of that stuff that's coming out of that, we may have some good tools that come out of that we can certainly bring in front of the county commission or planning commission for adoption in the county. Karen will update you in the next few minutes on where we stand on that assessment. But again, that was strictly for the city.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. That was a good I think we're using a lot of this developing in the city to sort of inform what we're doing in the county, but this whole discussion was county regulations, zoning regulations. Mr. Bailey.
Well, you may just answered it, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if the reason that this whole presentation was geared towards the county was because the city is actually doing a zoning code assessment. So now would it be fair to say, in your opinion, Mr. Chairman, or maybe this is a question for John, the county regulations are being reviewed through this process, which was in some respects initiated by the Home Builders Association, and the city is doing something very similar by way of a consulting scope of work?
There's a specific ask, yes, from the builders to look at some specific parts of the county zoning code. Yeah, so they're two different processes.
And I think what the difference is, the city is looking at the entirety of the zoning code. This is just looking at residential in the county.
Well, this is looking at the specifics that were brought up by the Home Builders Association first.
But it's not a full-blown county zoning review.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just get some clarification on where we've left it here. It might be my understanding that staff is going to pursue the creation of two new zoning tools or two new zones. In addition, they are going to write up the suggestions that Mr. Farmer suggested. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And those will be brought back to this body for consideration either next month or the following.
Yeah, we'll try to get as much as we can in May, and then whatever, we still got to do some work on, we'll get to y'all in June.
Why don't we put on the agenda at least an update next month, so we know, so we at least know progress or where we're at.
The easy one, Mr. Farmer's, will be easy. It's just the two new zones we're creating, and we'll do a timeline of how those fit in, like a scope, not a scope, but a range of where these fit in.
Yeah, Brian, I was going to suggest maybe one way of breaking it up is do the subdivision stuff in May, and do the zoning stuff all together in June.
Yeah, we could. And that's one thing to point out, the sub-reg amendments do not go on the front of the county commission. They rest with the planning commission. So in May, the sub-reg stuff will be done. And the flag lots, all the flag lot stuff, that could be done in May. The zoning is a little bit harder.
I was thinking the opposite, but anyway, but go ahead. Does anybody else have any? I think that's direction. Do y'all have staff, what you need direction wise?
We do. And this has been recorded. We have direction which we're going. I think, Mr. Chairman, Doug Fisher had his hand raised.
No, I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
I definitely want to hear from him.
No, we've got our direction of what needs to be done.
Mr. Fisher, if you want to speak, I'd love you to, as we sort of close this out. Go ahead, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that I had about like a 4-minute presentation to run through, but I think that I'll take the advice of, I think it was Mark Twain who said, when you have the vote, shut up and sit down. I do want to read the first part of it, which is first and foremost, I'd like to thank the RPA staff and the Planning Commission for the obvious diligent work in reviewing this proposal. We're greatly encouraged at the staff and the Commission's recognition of a needed update and flexibility to present zoning restrictions in light of today's housing market crisis. So I can eliminate the rest of that little speech that I had just to say that essentially we have found common ground with the staff and appreciate many of their allowances in terms of what I think they have recommended. I think that we literally only disagreed in the addition of some minor, what I would call minor tweaks, and a little bit of consolation or compromise on a couple of tweaks to the existing R1. Otherwise, in terms of what I think has been suggested as an R1S, pertaining only to those areas newly developed and under sewer, that I'm very pleased to hear this conversation today. And thank you for the time to address it.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments on this? I do appreciate. It's hard to chair this when I've been intimately involved in this for a while on some of these discussions. And I think at the end of the day, relative to RPA staff and even county staff, which actually goes across many different departments, some departments I'm involved in administratively and some I'm not, that I do think we are continuing to try at least to look at comments from individuals on how to maybe do things better. So I do appreciate RPA staff, the presentation and the information, and look forward to what comes back in the next month and the next couple of months, and then even some continuing conversations on some of these other items that we've mentioned. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to thank your staff as well. You know, but without them, there's valuable input from your staff as well as my staff. We've done a good job, and I think to get this turned around in a quick time and to provide some responses back. And we do agree. You know, we always got to look at our zoning code. It's not it's living, breathing document. We always got to look at it for changes.
Right.
And thank the home builders for bringing it to our attention as well.
Okay. Okay, well then looks like we'll have a lot of information, or at least an update next month on this. So thank you. Staff updates.
I'll try to make this quick. I know we're ready to get out of here, but we got some things that are coming next month for review. I'll just give you highlights real quick. We'll go through them in a second though. One, this is a request from a form-based code committee on clarity on projecting signs in the form-based code. We'll talk about that in a second. Number two is Hamilton County amendment to the zoning code in the C2 and C3 zone. This comes from the Building Inspections Department. In the C2 and C3, you have a lot of auto-oriented uses that are in that zone, heavy intensive uses, but it doesn't specifically mention car washes as a use. So we've had a request for a car wash. So we want to clarify that that is permitted in those zones. And so we'll bring an amendment next month to add those uses in the C2 and C3. Number two on the screen, this is more for Ethan, but he's not here today. Last month, you may remember, we brought a zoning code amendment to the county, zoning regulations on hotels in the C2 and C3 zone. And then also a special permit for buildings taller than 35 foot. Had a lot of fire codes in that permit. We have now since taken that out at the direction of Ethan. It was a good point on his part, why I have building codes in a zoning code. So we talked with the fire marshal and we all agreed there was no need for that to be in the zoning text amendment. So that's been removed. Also next month, we do it every year. We'll have the annual affirmation of officers, which is the chairman and vice chairman. That will be on the agenda for next month. Then Karen Rennick will briefly provide you an update on the zoning code assessment. So on projecting signs, we also have, I think they're still online. We have Sarah Robbins and Karen Hunt. If there's any questions, I'll try to do my best to explain this. But the Form-Based Code Committee has brought it to the attention that they need to amend the proposed language in the Form-Based Code in regard to signage. Everything you see in white is the existing language. The items in red is what's being amended. It's not clear, like in item A, projecting signs may be located on any facade facing a street or on a corner of a building that fronts two perpendicular streets. That's a little confusing how that language is. So what we're adding is the word and. So in addition to the signs that are on the facade, you can also have a corner sign. So the and is being added to clarify that. Item B, no change. The only thing we're doing there is underlining 12 square feet or more. No change. Item number C, again, is no change. Only thing we're recommending is to underline the 9 square feet. Item D is being added. That's not currently in the current form-based code. Basically what it's saying is the square footage of any corner sign counts towards the maximum square footage for each side of the building. The square footage of the corner sign will be divided evenly between the two building sides. So that's being added. And I have an illustration of what that looks like in a minute. But that's being added. And finally, the only thing we're doing there is shifting that to a new number E. This is in the current form-based code. This is an illustration on sign types. Right now, your maximum square footage is based on the height of the buildings. So what we're adding here is clarifying that per building side under maximum square footage. So it's per building side. It's not clear in the current language what that looks like. So what we're wanting to do is clarify per building side of a corner building, you have 20 square foot of total signage based on a 4 to 12 story building. So for example, this is a corner building. This is Karen Hunt. She presented this last Thursday at the Form-Based Code Committee. This is a corner building. It's currently 4 stories. So your maximum square footage is 20 square feet. So for example, you have a corner sign. That sign is 3 foot by 8 foot. That equals a total square footage of 24 square feet. If you divide that by both sides, that's 12 feet per side. Also on this corner building, they have one other sign that's a tenant sign that's 2 by 4 or 8 square foot. So when you add those two signs up, you get your maximum of 20 square feet of total signage. Another example, this is just where you have more signs on a corner building. If you have a corner building, you have a 2 by 8, which is a 16 square foot corner sign that counts 8 feet towards your total signage. So other 2 signs on this building are 6 square feet. Adding out that all together, you get a total of 20 square feet of signage. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to clarify that in addition to these signs that are on the wall, your total square footage also can incorporate a corner projecting sign. Whereas right now, it's not clear in the Form-Based Code Committee. So we're hopefully bringing you an amendment next month that will clarify that square footage and how that sign's counted. So if anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer that. Or we do have, I think, Karen Hunt and Sarah Robbins on the line. So again, these are more housekeeping clarifying amendments.
Is that how that was being enforced the whole time, or are we now changing practice to include both sides of that projecting sign for?
I'll let John or Karen Hunt perhaps answer that, because the way it's worded, I think, from my understanding, it was confusing to the Form-Based Code Committee.
Yeah, I think it's been consistent. The problem hasn't been consistent. They needed some additional guidance. I think, and I believe they had a meeting with the Form-Based Code Committee to be clear about what the intent was. So they just needed to clarify this language to be more consistent about the practice, is my understanding.
Because I think what some people were saying, well, once you do your corner sign, that's it. You can't do anything else.
Sarah's on. I think Sarah's unmuted. I think she.
Sarah, okay.
Hi, this is Sarah Robbins. I've been in this role as the Form-Based Code Development Review Planner since this summer, and we haven't had a lot of cases come through with this. Our staff member, Travis Swilley, reviews the sign permits for Form-Based Code, and I work together with him on those. But it was unclear to the committee. We had a case come in front of the committee because there was a corner sign that covered the allocation of the entire signage, and then there was a permit for another projecting sign on one side of the building, and the committee interpreted it differently than we interpreted as staff. We interpreted it consistently with how you're seeing it now. And the committee said, well, this could be interpreted either way. So from that case earlier, well, it was actually in late 2020, because of that case, it prompted us to get some clarity on this text because it was confusing to everyone. And that prompted us to request RPA to just clear it up, please. And that's where we are now.
I just would have never guessed that both sides of a projecting sign would go against your square footage.
No.
This is one side.
It's actually not both sides of the sign.
It's only
both
one
sides
side.
Of,
One
yeah,
side.
Well, it's the sign itself on being on can have two sides to the sign, of course, but it's both sides of the building are allowed to have signage. And then on a corner, it can count for both sides.
It's divided equally.
Sorry, that sounded even
But it counts.
out
But it counts. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like this side gets 20 square feet, the other side gets 20 square feet. But if it's projecting sign on the corner, it's divided equally. And so this side would get 12 square feet and the other 12 square feet would go on the other side of the building.
Okay.
If that helps, CD.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm a little
It's
tired.
confusing. It's
A little
confusing.
tired, I guess. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's all we're doing. We're trying to bring this back to clarify how that projecting signs counted towards total square footage.
Brian,
The only thing else we got is Karen Rick can give you an update on the zoning code assessment.
okay.
The zoning code assessment, and just as clarified, this is the Chattanooga zoning ordinance, an assessment of the Chattanooga zoning ordinance. And this is what we kicked off last year with consultant support. So consultants are really doing the heavy lift on this. And just as a reminder, the intention is to remove outdated language, update definitions, accommodate emerging uses, simplify the document, and reduce the need for zoning ordinance amendments, variances, and conditions. So again, the end result's a technical report with recommendations on how to update and standardize the ordinance. And then we'll take that recommendation from there and determine what we want to move forward into codification or amendment. So far the consultants completed that initial review of the existing documents. They had multiple rounds of stakeholder interviews with RPA staff and LDO, and they've conducted the individual stakeholder and focus group meetings, and staff review, I know we're able to attend those. And that was kind of wrapping up at the end of the year. So currently the consultants are finishing the actual zoning ordinance analysis and drafting the that internal review document for staff to take a look at. So staff will review that. We should get that in about 2 weeks. We'll review that and provide that feedback for the consultants to wrap up their technical report. So once the feedback has been addressed, we'll plan on presenting the draft recommendations to the Planning Commission and Chattanooga City Council. We've had a little bit of change on timing due to the elections. Really, we were going to try to wrap up around this time, but because of elections, we'll likely undertake those informational sessions in May or June, but they're currently not scheduled. So instead of kind of doing all the education and letting the council know in April, May, we're going to try to, March, April, we're pushing that to May or June. So we'll let you know and work with council on getting that on their agenda, but that's just to let you know it is moving forward and like step 4 of 6 at this point. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
You knew I would.
No, absolutely. It's been a while since we've touched this, so I appreciate the question.
So when we think about presenting it to council, we are going to be working through, keep in mind, probably working on a continuing resolution with our budget with the new mayoral administration. So if you want to touch base with me, I can help lead you through the timing on that, because we're going to have 3 new members on council and working through a brand new budget, which is going to consume a tremendous amount of resources and time for the council. So I want to be careful with that.
We agree, and that's kind of why it's left up as kind of as generic a statement as I made it. And also I'll probably get with you on, do we want to do a zoning planning commission 101 with the new council members before we even get to the zoning? You know, here's some possible changes to the zoning ordinance. So here's the recommendations for changes. So I will coordinate that with you. We will kind of defer to council at this point on the timing once we get the draft report done, because a lot of that is the education and informing them, because we'll make the decisions on, you know, when we move it forward. So yes, I will get with you and we'll kind of take a look at that schedule, and then we'll back it up to address planning commission.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Karen.
you very much. Yes.
Okay, any other questions for Karen or staff? Okay, thank you, Karen. So is that all the staff updates, John?
Yes, that is.
Okay, so do we, I guess Karen can check or somebody can check, do we have any public comments on non-agenda items?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you, Emily. Nothing from commission, okay. Take a motion to approve
Approve the
minutes. A motion by Commissioner Ledford, second by
Farmer.
Okay. So we have to roll call that, correct?
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye. Roll call.
Okay, Ledford,
Yes.
maybe. Coker.
Yes.
Okay, Matthews is left. Okay, Farmer.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Martin has left. Bailey.
Yes.
I think Barone's not here anymore. Hyatt. I think she's muted. I think we have a past minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Appreciate the discussion. Okay, with nothing else, I have a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
staff.
everybody.
Yes, sir.